and I will call Union 31 to order. Present, myself, Summer, Lauren, Sheila's on her way, Jeannie's present, Michael Cowett's not coming, John's here. Anybody else?
Timothy Lewis is in place of Michael Cowett.
Gordon, I am the alternate for Union 31 for Plimpton as well.
Okay. Alternate.
Okay, I will call Silver Lake Regional to order. We have all of our members except Chris, who I believe is still coming tonight. Leslie Ann is unable to make it. So thank you all. Oh, it's kind of nice to be together. We're a good-sized group when we do this, huh? The purpose of tonight's meeting to start with is to review shared cost contracts. The Admin Review Subcommittee has met a couple of times now to review contracts, and you have a cover sheet in front of you listing the order of how we'd like to discuss the contracts tonight. What we'd like to do is have our superintendent give a little bit of an outline overview of the position as we go, and then we can talk about what we'd like to do to update the contract.
So in your packet, you'll see, in your electronic packet, you'll see a number of contracts that were presented to the administrative review. There are a number of shared cost contracts this year. This is unusual to have this many shared cost contracts in 1 year. And I am recommending for the payroll coordinator, administrative assistant, accountant, benefits coordinator, technology para that has not been filled, nurse leader is currently 1 year contract, assistant superintendent, and network administrator. There's one exception in this list, and that's the assistant superintendent. I have asked for a salary adjustment and 2% for the following 2 years to make his rate more comparable to it's still under the average, but more comparable to the median and mean of assistant superintendent wages in Massachusetts. Also, we have an administrative assistant that is not making a competitive rate with what we currently offer for administrative assistants in other buildings, and so there's an adjustment in her first year. It is more comparable, but it is still below what administrators assistants make in some of our other districts with the same amount of years of experience. And everyone else is 3% for up to 3 years. Those were all reviewed and recommended by the Administrative Review Committee. The Director of Facilities, we're opening the contract to adjust the salary to make that wage more comparable for the next 3 years. And that is in your packet. We also discussed the possibility of a shared cost position, Director of Human Resources, with a draft job description. And we talked about the complexity of personnel law, the complexity of some of the leaves, the number of districts that have hired human resource directors in the past few years because of the complexity. Towns are also feeling that strain. It's certainly an area of need for us in the Silver Lake District, and we wanted to begin that conversation as a potential addition that was not presented in the Silver Lake budget. As it is, it would be a shared cost position. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the positions in your packet. I would remind you that these positions do not have steps and lanes. This is the only increase that these positions would receive.
Anyone from Union 31 have questions for the superintendent?
Just ask one, please. Dr. Prue, do you know if all of these contracts have been accepted as we've seen in our packet?
No, I do not. I'm awaiting the approval of the school committee to grant me the authority to discuss these contracts, but I believe that they are fair and appropriate to try to address some of the previous amounts that they were making that were not comparable or competitive, and will help us to maintain staffing.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Union 31? The only thing I would bring up is that while I believe the Director of Human Resources would be an important position, I don't think it should be funded in this upcoming fiscal year.
And that position, if I may add, that position would probably cost us anywhere from $100,000 to $110,000 to get the kind of person with the experience that we're looking for in those areas, as well as having experience in a school setting in particular. So those two components would make this probably about $100,000 to $110,000 per year.
I do have a question, and I think you may have talked about it last time, I can't remember, about the Director of Human Resources. Is that a 12-month position?
That would be a full year.
Okay.
Jeannie?
Dr. Prue, also regarding that new position, we had discussed in the admin review that there is another position that's current that would not exist if this position is funded, is that correct? So there'd be a little bit of cost savings from what's currently budgeted?
We have not presented any staffing reductions, but there was a discussion in admin review that that might be something that the committee may want to consider.
Is that a shared cost discussion, or is that,
That's a shared cost discussion.
what would if one position's created and one's eliminated, what would the total increase at the 115 approximately be?
Probably closer to 60.
Something just under 60, yeah.
That would be the net increase.
That'd be the total net increase, yes, to the whole shared cost budget.
Mark?
I have a newbie question, I guess. So we had our budget presentation on Monday, and this thought just occurred to me. So you presented the budget. Are these positions included in the budget that was presented, or is this in addition to it? I mean, I know it's shared costs, so I guess maybe.
This one position is not included because our shared cost budget did not include any new or enhanced
Okay.
staff.
So even all these.
The other increases, with the exception of facilities, is included.
Okay.
All the other increases are included.
Thank you.
Dr. Prue, you mentioned at the start that we had kind of a high number of these concluding at the high number of contracts concluding at the same time. Is that just that they're different lengths but all happen to have the same end date, or are we basically looking at 3-year agreements that are all going to keep concluding at the same time?
They're all going to keep concluding at the same time, and I think what happened is that Ryan and I were hired in the same year. In addition, the previous superintendent took care of some contracts before retiring, and so what has been created is a larger than what would probably happen randomly, a larger than normal amount at one time.
Okay, and then I just want to be clear on the math. Up to 3% for up to 3 years budget, that's 3% across the entirety of the 3 years, so that 100 is 103 after 3 years, or it's 3% every year?
3% every year.
Okay.
Just on the discussion on the timing of the contracts, there was at one point in time spacing between the contracts for the administrative staff and between the union negotiations, so it was originally lined up. We wouldn't be dealing with everyone all at once at the same time, and it just seems like it's shifted back to we're dealing with everybody all at once because of the conditions of COVID and everything else where we went to one-year contracts. So it seemed like an awful lot. They were spaced out more before.
For clarity too, on the assistant superintendent, the 2% and the 2%, that's in addition to the 3%?
There's a salary adjustment, and then the following 2 years are 2%. So just to give you some background, I just want to get my notes, sorry.
The 2% is instead of the 3%.
So it's instead of, I'm just,
Instead of,
Okay.
yes.
so that top point there doesn't really apply to the assistant superintendent?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't apply to the assistant superintendent.
Because you're wanting to do a moderating increase right now and then 2% in the second 2 years.
And
Okay.
currently, the nurse leader is 1 year, but, you know, and that's how we've handled it in the past. And it might be, given the number of shared cost contracts, it might be best to do that this year, and then next year, examine the possibility of a 3-year.
How are we getting HR work done right now?
You're looking at it.
You know, that's a very good question, because I think the answer speaks to why the proposal's in front of you.
It's, to the best of my ability, I research and work with other staff members to try to find answers. As you know, I'm participating in all of the negotiation sessions for multiple teachers' unions and multiple unions across the board. So it's
Busy.
it's not what an average superintendent would be responsible for. Because typically you would have one teachers union and then the other. And so I think probably Silver Lake probably needs an HR person, probably more than your average district, just because of the complexity of the region. But again, it's all hands on deck, and all work together to try to get whatever needs to be done. Depending upon what the issue is, we have strong staff in central office. It's a team effort, but it's definitely an area of strength.
So I have a question. One of the things you were just mentioning was the negotiations with the teachers' unions. Would a director of human resources be involved in some of that negotiations in lieu of, or potentially be able to switch in?
That would be the hope, and even if I'm still involved, they could at least be a support person to help gather certain pieces of information that I'm currently gathering prior to and sending out. Things like that.
Okay, one more.
I don't think I could completely remove myself from negotiations
Right.
completely, but it would be another way of helping to address it and make sure that we're well prepared for our sessions.
Right. And I just want to add, I know that no year is going to be a good year to add this position if we're going to do it. I said this, I think, at our last meeting when we first brought this up, but the company that I work for, it's a small company. The number of employees varies quite a bit, anywhere from 150 to 300, depending on what's going on. But we've had a full-time HR person from the beginning, and we really needed it. The amount of work, all the laws that change with employment law, never mind municipal laws, but just a private company. And we had to deal with a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit, and without that HR person, never would have been able to handle it. And the lawsuit stemmed from a point in time when we didn't have an HR person. So things are a lot more focused and taken care of. I feel like it's something, with the number of employees that we have and the districts, the buildings, the administrators, it really does seem like it's something that we need to strongly consider.
And actually, I usually go back and forth between the two sides, but if you would allow me, I echo what Eric says, and we focus a great deal of time and effort and dollars to the kids. That's what we're here for, the students. The faculty to support the education of our students. We run a very slim administrative team. In all the years, I've either been on the elementary school committee or Silver Lake, very seldom have we ever attempted to add to the administrative team. At some point, something's got to give. And like Eric indicated, when the ball drops in an HR situation, you're looking at a lawsuit. You're going to spend, we will spend more money than what this salary increase is looking at. Dr. Prue puts the children and the schools and the staff before everything. In my opinion, if she has come to us and asked us to add a staff member, then truly the staff member is needed. It's not a good year, but I would ask everybody to give it strong consideration because, again, you can only run a slim team so long without having to add to it to make sure you're protecting everybody's interest.
I don't have an issue with adding a position like this. I just think it's a cost from perspective that I have from the town of Halifax is that we are looking at a major deficit with the operating budget. So I think it's a balancing act between maintaining what we have in the school, at the elementary school, what we have here at Silver Lake. So if I get outvoted, the position is necessary, and that's what it is. It's just, I'm looking at it from a cost perspective. And if the request had been there last year and it was something that we knew was coming up, I could say, okay, we talked about it previously, we know the need's there. So that's the only other thing, because typically we don't just add a position without talking about it for a year or two. But if I get outvoted, I get outvoted, and no, the position's needed, so.
Go ahead, Sam.
Just to kind of echo what Gordon is saying, our budget presentation on Monday was dismal at best in Halifax. And I think we all understand on the elementary committee that, you know, the way this goes with the complexity of being a regional district, that in Silver Lake, if the two of the three towns in the district pass the budget, we have to move forward in Halifax, which means that the only place that we can cut is our already hurting elementary budget. And I agree. I think that we need to do everything we can to, you know, make sure that we are compliant and our district is not facing a lawsuit that we can't handle. And I think the support for our administration is necessary. I think I need a little more confirmation on whether or not we're replacing and upgrading a position or if we are adding a position, because I think that from Halifax perspective, you know, $18,000 in our budget is a lot different than $35,000 in our budget. And so I guess with the uncertainty there, I have a really hard time supporting this position if it's in addition to what we're already, like a full additional position. And again, to Gordon's point, I'm not arguing that it's not necessary. I think that it probably is. I trust your guidance. I just don't know financially where we can get this money from out of our elementary budget.
I would just say ideally it would be in addition to. During the admin review session, we talked about ways that we might be able to decrease FTE. But again, that it's not as if we don't need current support.
Is there, and I'm going to go back to our discussion in the subcommittee. If you had to make a judgment call now, balancing the full-time HR director that you want and some options to alleviate some of the expense, perhaps 40,000 or so, or a portion of that. I think we're talking part-time versus full-time. If we could get just a sense for the numbers now, we could possibly get people comfortable.
So we had discussed it as a leadership team, that it would, that because of the need, we would address the FTEs in an effort to make this happen, but we could only address a portion of the FTEs, not, we couldn't reduce a full amount. We're looking at probably 0.5 FTEs to be reduced, and that still wouldn't take care of the entire salary for this person. We couldn't completely eliminate a position because it would create other problems.
The vote typically is a budgeted amount from this meeting. Is there an amount? Because it's not printed on the sheet.
So it would be, the range would be from 100 to 110,000.
But I guess I just mean total for what you're looking for us to vote tonight.
Christine, do you have that?
Christine, yeah.
I have the shared cost budget that already presented,
Yes.
so would you like to just, so right now our shared cost budget is at $1,860,164.22.
Christine, could you repeat that?
$1,860,164.22. And what would you like to add to that?
So if we're looking at that, we would also, you're saying that that does not include one of these positions, and it does not include the Director of Human Resources.
It does not include the Director of Human Resources.
Or the
And what
Director of Facilities.
Facilities.
And it's just the increase for that position.
Right, the facilities increase.
Facilities increase is not in here,
Correct, it's not. That's determined with the final.
but the other,
Everything else on the sheet is included in the
okay.
So I guess my question is, do we need to vote each one of these separately, or typically we just vote the shared cost budget tonight as a whole? So is there,
That's the will of the committee. There may be some positions that you're more likely to support than others.
Discuss how it is as well.
okay.
Jill?
I'm sorry?
I was just saying that we also have your contract to discuss as well.
And that's not in this $1,860,000?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess, what would be the, so this number you gave us is just to deal with section 1.
Correct.
What's the cost for number 2?
Number 2, the HR person.
No, number 2, Director of Facilities.
I don't know that decision. I don't have a decision on that yet.
I'll give you we discussed the increase.
Yeah.
I'll give you the contract.
Technology para, that's the position that we have that we're trying to replace that.
I just want to put the
person
number and move on.
Or that's an additional supportive position.
Well, that's interesting, because tonight in the presentation, which you'll see tonight, Steve would prefer the reason why you don't see a contract in here is because Steve would actually prefer an actual technician and use what we would have paid a technology para to help offset the cost of that.
Okay.
So I'm glad you asked that question.
So, right, so the technology para is something that we do not have built in the district right now?
It is in the budget. That person became a technician when one of our technicians left for another position. been very difficult to hold on to our technicians at the rate that they're currently paid.
Which is an open position, right?
So it's, okay.
Yes.
All right.
It exists.
So it exists.
Not human beings.
So there's no contract you can create
Got it.
because there's no person yet.
Right, but this is what we anticipate.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
I was just going to say, just a suggestion, that maybe break this up into 3 different votes. Vote number 1, then vote for all the contracts, then 2, the director of facilities, then 3, the HR, then 4, the total shared cost budget based on the first 3. Oh, sorry. Right.
I was just trying to skip to step number 4 and just get the vote done.
Did you bring cookies for that?
I did not.
I thought you were.
I was going to, and life happens.
Well, yeah, I mean,
If we know what the total that the superintendent's asking for, then if there's a motion to approve that,
Are you talking about section 1?
I'm saying the whole thing.
So you just voted off.
Yeah, if I'm going to,
Okay.
it looks like I'm going to get outvoted for that discussion, so,
Well, you know,
so I would, if the motion is there,
I don't know that.
Yeah.
well, if we know that number, somebody can make the motion,
yeah,
and then we have debate on,
then we're done. Maybe,
yeah.
maybe not.
Well, then we need to talk about Jill's contract.
So do we do that?
Do you want me to leave at this point? And I think what
want one
Christine,
vote.
I think what Christine needs to know is whether or not she's adding the full price of a human resources person or part of a human resources person, which would require a reduction in force.
That might sway the votes.
Wait, what? Wait, now we're entertaining a part-time HR?
No, reducing the FTE.
Can't,
Oh,
you
of
can't,
another staff member.
Right.
yeah, you can't vote on one number without
I would
having
Well, we're going to have to vote multiple times the way it's going.
it's the full number
The
of
full number
everything.
right now?
Because I would make a motion.
110 for the HR person, 10 for facility, and 25 to go from a para to a tech.
Yep.
That seems to be, that would be $2,005,164.22. $5,164.22. I will double check.
That doesn't include,
That doesn't include the superintendent?
Hers is in this number, but
Oh,
not
it is.
listed.
Yeah.
up
got
here.
it,
Right.
got it.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the $2 million, $5,164.22 as a shared cost budget.
Do you need a motion from the,
I don't know if we need 2 seconds.
Second from the region.
Okay, is there a motion?
Question. You mentioned 25 for the para to a tech. I thought that was in the Silver Lake budget.
No, it's not in the Silver Lake budget. We were going to discuss that in the Silver Lake meeting because we found out today that
He wants to offset.
Steve would like to propose offsetting, getting a technician instead of the para.
That keeps it as a full-time tech, full-time para, full-time tech, is that much more money?
Oh, didn't she add 25 for the full-time tech?
Treat a para to a tech.
I think 33.3.
Paras don't work.
I gotta look at the enrollment number.
They don't make the same than a technician.
But this isn't a tech.
You guys went up this year.
What am I missing here?
We took on the ELL. Let's be honest here. We took on the
Hey,
ELL.
hey, 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 hey.
Let's remember Kingston took on the ELL here.
But that's not in this, that shouldn't be in our shared cost budget. Or you're doing that pending that we approve that later in the year.
Technology.
Thank you, I'm sorry. I just wanted to follow the trail here. Okay, all right. Yeah, we're going.
Yeah, see? Thanks, welcome. I'm taking one for the team here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I get it now, it took me a minute.
And don't worry, I'm gonna go cut my pants and my shirt later and look really poor during
The
the
last time
civil.
we were here, that was in here, and that's not here anymore, because we took that off.
Oh, Jason.
So that's another position that we took in Kingston, that when we
Paula,
did
do you
share
want a
cost.
motion from our side?
You guys,
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the $2,500,164.22.
2,005,000.
Excuse me?
It's 2,005,000, not 500,000.
Thank you. $2,005,164.22 shared cost budget.
Is there a second by John? Okay. You guys made the motion first, you vote.
Any further discussion on this side?
Are you not accepting the contract?
Oh, I just didn't know we had.
Discuss what?
Jill's contract.
We're going to, but we're looking to vote this first.
Okay.
The assessment,
I'm just confused procedurally.
30.
So we're voting to
So
approve
Halifax
it before we
actually dropped.
discuss it.
a full percent.
Technically, it's in there, yeah.
Okay. I just was clarifying. I was
Yeah.
confused. We're back to
It is-
starting going backwards.
Yeah.
I don't care. I was going to approve
Yeah.
it.
No,
If you could text me.
Okay.
I'll text you if I have any further.
Could we ask one more math question first? Christine, what was this fiscal year's shared cost budget?
FY '22?
Yes.
FY '22 shared cost budget was $1,783,176. So from that to the original budget for '23, shared cost was a 4.32% increase before we added these other items.
Before those, okay.
I'm Mr. Pike.
Warren. 1,783,
Jill is gone now.
73?
Yeah, Jill,
Is that-
so
One
yeah, so Jill's gone.
1,783,176.
176, okay.
Her contract in your package as well.
1 million.
4.32 before the,
I think we would all agree our superintendent does a wonderful job for us. I sat with her and had a very good conversation. You know, she loves this district, she loves what she does. She's got a big job, and it's a big stressful job. But she certainly is looking forward to having another contract and staying with us, you know, through another contract. The administrative review team suggested a 3, 3, and 3 that is already in the numbers that you have. The other thing I asked Jill and the administrative review team discussed was, she does have an enormous job, and it is very stressful. Is there anything else we could do for her contract that would, you know, be a benefit, show our support to her, show our support for her? So the idea of giving her flexibility for working from home periodically when her day is conducive to it. Perhaps she has an appointment close to where she lives. Perhaps her day is all meetings. It's not working from home every single day. It's not working from home one day every single week. It would be periodic. In this discussion, we'll be pending crafting appropriate language with our attorney, and he is already considering language that would be inviting for her to do so, but protective for us, that it's a periodic, it's a every now and then sort of thing. So tonight, it's the concept of doing this and putting this in her contract.
Paula, if I may, we had a nice discussion about this last night, and I respect where we're coming from with the concept, and I do think Jill is due whatever can make her this kind of job easier. And Emily had actually brought it up, does it need to go into the contract? Because as it is right now, we don't have any language preventing, like if she were to take meetings from night at home or something like that. Is this something that we want to open the door for contractual language for? And I think that that's where, like at first when you had presented, which I think sounded good, I was thinking like summer vacation, you know, like if there's a couple days. But I think I'm concerned that it could open up the door kind of like, you know, it could be an issue if it's in contractual language, and then Emily had said, well, currently, there's nothing that prevents it. Now, is this something that we can just kind of all agree that, you know, if our superintendent is sometimes working from home, that's something that we understand and we respect? Like, so I was wondering if it needs to be contractual language.
Oh, I'm not sure what other comments were made last night, and I would want to bounce that concept off of our attorney.
Yep.
But can I just say, I'm sorry, I feel like anybody want to go from last night first, because for me, as a person who works with people who are remote and in person, and as we morphed into this new reality of life, right, I think that even just the superintendent herself, just putting it in her contract, I'm thinking that really any admin that could do something from home that would not, you know, hinder their job responsibilities, and they're able to do their job responsibility from home. I think putting it just in her contract and not kind of putting it in kind of an overall policy, I just feel like with anybody, even Christine or you know, the assistant superintendent, if they could take a meeting from home, I just feel like great. If you can do that from home and you can do the 7 o'clock meeting from your house with our 5 committees, I think that's great. I understand what you're saying about like wanting to physically, be here and do that, but I think as we've morphed into this reality, I think it's important to kind of think of the overall district and not just her, although she is extremely hardworking, and I think that I want to give her something above and beyond. I think she's done an amazing job, and last year when we sat with her about her goals and everything, she's outshined everything. I don't know who else could have done this job but her. But I also feel like there's a lot of admins and a lot of people that could hopefully do some stuff from home that I would think that overall in the district, we could work on that. So it's hard for me to say just her and put it in her language, because not all the time, but I also feel like there are people that could do some meetings from home, and why not have that flexibility if they don't have responsibilities that are affecting the school system right now. Like, I don't want them to say, I'm going to work from home and I'm not going to go to work today, but I think if it's not going to affect the way the school is run, then why not have it district-wide?
I think that's an interesting concept. I think that's a different discussion. And I don't know the ramifications of doing something that night. The one thing I would say is, working from home isn't just taking a meeting at 7 o'clock from home. Working from home would be, Jill's up at 6 working, as so many people are, and is concluding at God knows what time. I think the concept you're talking about is a different discussion for a different night. I would want
Language
to be prepared for that, because there could be, other considerations. I'd like to stay focused on Jill as one person in this room. I would like to stay focused on Jill for this discussion.
So I think, one of the things an HR director would do would be to put a remote working policy in place, because that's something probably everybody needs to have. And I think it's even required in state. Yeah, I know it is for our private company. We had to do it. But I would lean more towards asking Russell if we really do need it, like they said, if we really need it in the contract, because if it doesn't say she can't do it, and we think that she can do it, then perhaps that's the way to handle it. But maybe ask Russell.
Do you want me to call Russell right now? Because that's who called me out of the room.
If you don't mind, I'm going to let Jason give an update, because we have been in contact with him on this.
So Mike Anton and I once negotiated the initial contract with Jill when she became our superintendent. And I just want to read the section that says personal business to you that's currently in her contract. So it says the superintendent will receive 3 days for personal business per contract year, which cannot be conducted on a non-school day during non-school hours. But then the next sentence, which is a fringe benefit that is included in many superintendents' contracts, is the following. Superintendent's workday is flexible and is frequently extended beyond normal work hours. Time off during the workday for personal business reasons or emergencies will be allowed without loss of pay or deduction from personal or vacation leave. Personal days shall not be accumulated from year to year. So some of the aspects of what you're discussing right now are already within her contract and within her purview. I think this was the way we were talking about an admin review was more of, it's a full workday with no personal obligations, potentially when she's on webinars all day long, where she could just as effectively do them from her home as coming all the way into the office. Again, I understand the concept of maybe over the summer or when there's no duties requiring her here in district. But there is some language and some latitude already contained within her contract that we could look at as well.
If I could just make one comment, Lloyd, and then in summer. The way I read that language is personal time. So I'm here in the district. I work an enormous amount of hours every single day, every single week. I have a dentist appointment, so I'm not going to have to be, I don't have to register that dentist appointment anywhere. I can run out for the 2 hours down the road, go to the dentist and come back, and it's covered by that language. I believe working from home is more, as you indicated at the end of what you just said, where you're 100% dedicated to the school, 7 a.m. or what have you, till 8 a.m., set 5 p.m., whatever it is at night, and and you've done everything virtually, remotely. There was no dentist appointment, there was no grocery shopping. It was a work from home. I mean, I did it for years as well, a couple of days a week, it was work from home. Gordon?
So one of the other aspects I wanted to just suggest here is that, part of what some of the concerns are is just what sort of precedent might we be setting for the future and for future superintendents and things like that. And I think that's important to keep in mind. A contract signals something about value. So you can say, look, we could do this without having to put it in the contract. That says something, though, when you don't put it in the contract. And I'm not saying whether that's good or bad, I'm just saying if, for instance, we're talking about very tight finances, if, for instance, we'd all like to give more money, but don't feel like we can, but feel like there are ways to show value, this being one of them, and then we say, we're kind of doing it as a handshake agreement as opposed to putting it in the contract, the actual value you're conveying in the contract is not there. So it's just something to keep in mind. There is something about value going into the contract when you consider it.
I agree with you before. The one thing I would add to your conversation, because I agree with what you said, every contract we start with, for instance, God forbid, a new superintendent, we start fresh.
Yeah.
So it's not to say this sort of thing or something in the future we put in the contract would have to be in the next superintendent's contract. So.
That was like a perfect segue, Gordon, because that's actually, I'm all for Jill working from home when she can do the work of her day and it does not impact her responsibilities or job. And I think my hesitation became the language around the contract started to be all these stipulations. This number of days or this advance notice or only in the summer or only once a week or only once a month. And that made me feel like it did the opposite of the intention.
Yeah,
the intention was we respect you as a professional and we think you can do an incredible job. You should be able to do that from any location you choose if it is not impeding your ability to do your job. And when you start adding in, you can only do it 1 day a week. Or if she starts doing it 4 times 1 month, are we going to start having issues? And so I was nervous that our discussion last night started talking about that crafting that language and those stipulations, and it felt like it devalued the purpose.
Yeah.
And then I wondered, well, do we even need it there? Couldn't we just say, do your job, do a great job.
Yeah.
Your location doesn't necessarily matter if you're on webinars all day. Do them from home
Yeah,
or do
striking
them
the
from
right
here.
kind of signal with it is going to be like with the right language is the challenge.
Yeah.
So from the admin review meeting, was this a request from Jill to include it in the contract?
No.
So I think if everyone here believes she's doing a good job and we believe the location part isn't really, needs to be dictated by us every day, which she does, and she's doing the job correctly, I don't think it really matters what the location is. I'm not sure that you want to include that in the contract.
Well, it's funny, I thought you were going somewhere else with that, and then you said, I'm not sure we should include that in the contract, because I was going to say, I think sometimes it does matter what the location is, because our superintendent should be present on campus. Like, God forbid, we have a gas leak, or something like that happens on campus, and she's not here because she's working remotely that day.
Well, I would think if she was at a conference, right, and something happened, she would find a way to get back here and take control of the situation. So I don't know that it would be any different if she's working at home and then said, something happened, I need to be present at one of the schools.
We also have an assistant superintendent that, again, I think that there's ways to, if she's gone and he's here, like, I think there's ways around that. Like, I have staff that I'm like, I can't make sure that if I'm not there, then my next person in line is there, and they know that they need to make those decisions.
That's a good point.
So it's, and again, I think talking about the other contract too with Ryan is that, we want to see him really thrive here, and I think, those are important things as well. And I think that I give, for instance, Kingston does ours remotely, like our meetings are remote right now. If they were all home remotely doing their meeting, it doesn't really matter where they are because we're remote. So they can be anywhere for that meeting. Is it easier to pull up a file or something maybe in their office? That's fine, but I wouldn't say you need to be physically in the building because our meeting is at 6, because we don't have our meeting physically anywhere. So it gives that flexibility, but I see what you're saying during the school day, but I think it's a matter of, that's their,
During the school day, like, she
Yeah,
takes the bus home at
yeah.
3 o'clock and do 5 school committee meetings. I don't have an issue with
Yeah.
that. I just think during the school day, I feel like there's something to be said for her being on camp, or whoever our superintendent is being on.
I'm going to make a suggestion, if I may. We have a public hearing at 6 for Silver Lake, so I apologize, I just have to be sensitive to time. Jill would understand if we needed to continue this discussion and come back to her. It was not a request of hers, and she understood that there was dialogue that needed to be had. Go ahead, go ahead.
Could we,
I just want to make a comment. So I think maybe what we need from us here tonight is to be supportive of this and to make a motion to support. And then we can work with the attorney to determine whether we need to send the contract or not with appropriate language. I think to Emily's point, we don't want to micromanage this. And in terms of reasonable should be in there, we need to have language. If we don't need to have language, then we probably should have a vote for the term. Maybe in our next joint meeting, that for the term of the contract, the joint committees are supported. What I don't want to have happen is people change and then they change their mind. The committee should be able to go on board if we're not going to put it in the contract, that this is what we expect for the term of the contract. If it should be in the contract, then you have the support because we support it. How we get to it is, I don't think, quite as important. If we're all generally in agreement that we trust her for the work she's doing and want to give her that flexibility where it's appropriate.
so do we need to vote her contract, both Union 31 and Silver Lake tonight?
We could come back, or we could vote it and augment it at some point with that language.
I would suggest that we vote the percentage increase towards their salary to renew the contract for 3 years. And if we need to come back to amend or add a side letter of agreement based on our conversation with Russell, but I'd like to settle this tonight for the numbers and for Jill.
So that's a motion from Union 31. Is there a second?
Second.
Consider that a motion
But we already have a motion on the floor.
for the total number, right? But this is for her contract specifically.
So can we have a motion without closing another motion?
Well, this was a part of that discussion, so yeah.
I'll be honest with you, the motion we have on the floor was inclusive of her contract and the increase in the languages aside, because it's not in the contract. So I think our motion, if that's the way we want to go, is a good motion to have on the floor right now.
because we're not doing anything right now.
Jeannie did.
No.
I did it for his, if we even need that.
Can I just ask what the language for Jill's contract is? Is it just to support the contract for another 3 years? Are we putting in to amend the language, or what would you like the language to be for that?
So my motion is to,
So is it?
Jason made the motion.
Made the motion.
my motion is to extend Superintendent Prue's contract for the next 3 years with the 333 increase towards her salary line, with the understanding that we will consult with Russ
Okay, perfect.
for either an amendment or a sidebar letter agreement.
And it's already part,
Seconded?
Yes.
and it's already part of the contracted
So,
money.
Do we have a disconnect here?
You did that, but, yeah. Hold on, Karen. Gordon made that vote and Jeannie seconded.
no, Jason made the motion because he's also part of Union 31 tonight.
Sorry, I forgot he was in Union 31.
Sorry.
Yeah. But then you made the motion again for Silver Lake.
And I seconded it for him.
Okay.
So I'll
He did
call,
it twice.
so I'll call for a vote from Union 31. All in favor?
Aye.
And I'll vote.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimous.
This is just the contract.
And I'll
Just the Jill's contract.
right, I'll do the same on the Silver Lake side. All those in favor? Okay, very good, unanimous. Thank
It's always nice when it's.
you. Now we need to go back to the shared cost. We have about 7 minutes to get through that.
So the motion on the table is for $2,005,164.22,
Right, which is the full addition of an HR person
without the reduction.
offset of a fraction of a person.
And that includes the facilities increase.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Okay,
Is there discussion on Union 31? Okay, all those in favor of the amended, the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand. Opposed is me and some, it passes.
I'm in the same on the Silver Lake side. All those
You
in
voted in
favor?
favor, correct?
Well, actually, so
Opposed?
would it be a tie? Or?
1, 2.
No, what if we agreed to?
All right.
No. Oh, it still passes. Did you want to change your vote?
Yeah. Sorry.
So for Union 31, opposed will raise their hand again. In favor, please raise your hand again.
Halifax, man, come on.
Just raise your hand.
Wait, you said opposed first?
Yeah, so it is.
All right, it passes.
4. Yes, 4.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, that was just in favor of. He just-
Lauren was,
So it's just one less for them.
okay, so we have a shared cost.
Locked her out.
Did you guys,
That's a bad
Can someone get her a key?
did you guys vote?
We voted.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So we have a shared cost budget.
We do.
Okay.
Yay!
Now we drown.
All right, then we have 1 or 2 minutes left. We need to have a school start time working group.
We got Emily coming in.
Do you take a couple of minutes to introduce the last concept?
Just really quickly, I know we're almost at time, but we're going to start a working group for, to discuss school start times and what is possible. I think after the pandemic, we've had new ideas about how we do school and when we do it and when we start and when we end it and who starts when and who starts when. So it's just a working group, it's not a subcommittee, so we don't need to post, but we would like to have representation from all of the unions involved because decisions that we come to or possibilities we explore would impact across the district, as well as I'll be working with Ryan to solicit input, and I've already talked to some folks within the union to solicit school input from the faculty side and administrative side, as well as we'll reach out to parents to have parent input and explore kind of what are the benefits and barriers of our current model and what other models might be out there. So this is just more informational since we're all here. If you can bring it back to your committees and discuss, you can email me at this over email and we will get.
Do you want one from each committee, like one person for the working group, or I'm sure my whole
I'm
committee.
happy with whoever wants to join. I mean, I don't think it needs to be.
As long as there's not a
super
quorum
rigid
of
to start,
members.
so-
Yeah.
But I think at least one from each would be fantastic, yes.
Okay, Eric,
No, I'm not volunteering.
you volunteer? Make sure you put Eric on that committee.
I just have a question.
You want to chair the working, that's
I was involved with this before, and I just want to make a comment that one of the biggest problems is after-school activities, because Duxbury does, nobody else around did the school changes. It affected their athletics and their clubs, their after-school stuff a lot, so I would just highly recommend that you get Martha or anybody in the athletic department to be involved, and parents need to understand the ramifications. We went through this before, and the parents knew, and it was an issue. It just needs to be a reminder.
You just have to make all the others
Like the ice time is not,
And that's not going to happen anytime soon.
like right now they have 2:30 to, I think, 3:30, and it's like ice time is like gold. So it affects
That's everything. My kid does her
the teams that keep daylight.
jobs.
Can I just add a comment to that as well, that I believe it was just before I joined the committee in 2015 or 16 that they had done this, and it was like exactly a 50% split with people in favor and people opposed. So I think that, if we are to even look at this again, which I'd be interested in getting on it just because it affects my family so much, even I think that we do need to make sure that we're pulling from all the stakeholders there and everybody, that it's definitely, because it could be a big change. It could be a big change. And to Eric's point too, I mean, how cool is that sometimes kids after school get, an hour of study hall between sports and athletics just because of the current schedule. So all sides need to be looked at.
Okay, so that's just going to be a working group?
Yep.
So is,
I was going to ask if there's anybody here from the Halifax committee that would want to be interested in joining that working group. That's what I was going to ask. Don't everybody jump
nominate
one.
no, not going to happen.
My only thought
Nice
is,
try.
I don't have the impact, like, I don't have a child in the school anymore, and the start time, I feel like with someone in the school would be more,
Kingston's going to have two, because I know that me and Jeannie will want to do it, but I want to ask my committee, because my committee always wants to be on everything, so I also have another person who might want to be on it as well, because I think Megan might want to be on it. So I don't want to say right now tonight, but I'm sure we will probably have two people from my committee on the working group, because I know at least both of us, but if not, I'm happy to do one less thing. But I'm just saying that I know that I will ask my committee, and I know Tim.
How about this? I will send an email to my committee and ask them if they're interested, because I think Lauren's point that it's good to get elementary and high school representation, because again, kids off buses, things like that, things maybe somebody's not thinking of because they don't have a child that age. Jen, are you raising your hand over there? Yeah. She's like,
Yay!
Okay. Is there any other Union 31 business tonight?
Motion to adjourn.
second.
From the union side.
Who seconded?
Lauren said.
All right. Secretary's pick on who seconded between Lauren and Jeannie. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn on the Silver Lake side.
No. Don't you guys?
All those in favor? Aye. Folks, it is 6:07. I'd like to call to order the Silver Lake Regional School Committee meeting for February 10th. And we are going to begin with a public hearing on our budget. If anybody would like to speak, if you could raise your hand when you're acknowledged, if you could stand, give your name and what town you're from. I'll just start this way. Gordon, please.
Hi, Gordon Andrews on the Halifax School Committee and the Halifax Board of Selectmen. Town of Halifax is, again, looking at a tough financial year this year. The elementary school budget was presented this previous week with special needs tuition, transportation, and the elementary school budget. It's an increase of $650,000. Prop 2.5 is $450,000. We have an excess capacity of approximately $230,000. New growth somewhere around 50. So basically, there's not a lot of money left just with those three line items within the town's budget. I know that Silver Lake's net minimum contribution increase is going to be a shift. And basically, I'll say it again, the budget for Silver Lake is really unaffordable for the town the way that it continues to grow. The town of Halifax should be receiving the most amount of support from Chapter 70 when you look at the budgets and you look at minimum contribution. But the way the assessment sheet works out, the town basically, the three towns are given the same percentage basically because it's taken off of the top versus taken out for each town. And I know that's something that the school district doesn't control. That's an issue for the legislature because before it used to tell you how much Chapter 70 funding would be for each town, and then you would take the subtraction point after that. So this is going to be a really tough year, and anything you guys can do to reduce that $1 million increase that was presented in the first budget would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Jean Coleman, I'm a Kingston resident, also Kingston School Committee. The $400,000 figure that was discussed at last month's meeting, that you had asked the principals to go back to the drawing board, I guess, and work on some cuts for presentation tonight, we all know where those cuts are going to come from. They're not going to come from the math and reading. They're going to come from the things that make school fun. And it was really, 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 I don't want to counter what Gordon just said. I understand that we're in a very complex region, and I hope that when you're looking at these figures and when you're looking at the final items that you cut, that you are even using a less conservative circuit breaker figure or whatever you got to do to bring it to the town meeting in the least, I guess, try to cut as little as you can, I guess, is what I'm asking, because this is directly going to affect our children and our programs that we can offer at the high school. So I just do what you can to bring it to town meeting and hopefully get the support there, because I think that when we're hearing these things presented at town meeting and stuff, someone that stands up for one article may not realize that the schools just cut $400,000. And I think that those kind of things need to be weighed on town meeting floor when we're talking about our overall priorities and what the townspeople want to see in our budget. So I just think that, at some point we need to be able to speak to the items in our budget, and we need to be able to back what they are. And when we get to town meeting, I think that that's like, we have autonomy over our budget, but once we get it to town meeting floor, let's be able to, stand up for these kids and these programs that you guys have worked so hard to create and bring to our schools. So I just don't want to see our schools lose that on behalf of our kids. So, thanks.
So that's kind of funny that she was saying that, because I'm like, I want to say probably the same thing. So I'm Sheila Vaughn. I have 7 Frank Street, Kingston. I'm also on the Kingston School Committee. I'm the chair of the Kingston School Committee. I'm also a selectman in Kingston, so I have my 2 hats. And it's tough. It's not easy. Kingston's been very lucky, and I think we are one of the towns around these 3 towns that we kind of say, we'll take one for the team here, we'll do what we can. But I'm always a person that I will fight on the town floor for what I want, what I need, what our kids need. And as a parent of a child that's coming up to the middle school and a child that is in the high school, it is really frustrating for me to see that my kids, I'm fighting for the elementary, and I want to fight for that, and I will fight for that. But I'm going to fight for my kids too, and I want to see my kids get what they deserve, and cutting things that my kids deserve because somebody else on the town might need something else that maybe isn't that important this year. And to me, we got to weigh in the pros and the cons of what's important. And I think the schools are very important. And people say, I care about the schools more than anything. I don't care about the schools more than anything in the town. But I think there are some things that you can look at and say, can we have it this year? We need this for the schools. And I think I'm happy to fight for that on the town floor. And I think it's important that there are things that when the principals sit down and they talk about what they need, and you just come in and say, cut 500 grand because that's what we wanted, that's what we need. You don't understand how much work has been put into what they did and how much work they did to put in what they need. That's what they need to survive in the school. We didn't say give you a wish list and go do that. So to me, it's very frustrating when you just pick a number and say, please cut that. Because it's not that easy. They've spent months trying to figure out what they need for their schools, and to just cut that kind of number and say, find that number somewhere, that's not easy. And I think that we got to think about fighting for these things on our floors. And I think people will look at that and say, you know what? Yeah, you're right, like on the town floor. But a lot of times people don't fight on the town floor. They just say the number and yes and no, and that's fine. And that could be that way. So people haven't even tried. I just think sometimes you don't want to go there with a big number and scare people. But I think sometimes you have to just do it and see what happens. Because that's important for the kids. And for me as a parent, as a selectman, and as a school committee member, I just feel as though it really is frustrating to see that kind of money taken out of the budget and not even try to go on your floor to see if what we can do. So, I'm done.
Anybody else would like to speak to the budget? Carl?
Good evening. Carl Pike, Town of Kingston. I'm speaking as a resident, although I also am the treasurer of the town. And I think that you all know me pretty well, that I really think the important thing is that we all continue to work together. I get concerned when I hear town officials talking about cuts. Well, you know, there are times when we have to ask for a second look at a budget. We have to consider, you know, maybe we can make this adjustment, okay? I believe strongly that we need to support school budgets much stronger across the board. I believe that we need to work and look at things like, I believe that the Silver Lake, the state aid is going to be a healthy increase this year. We need to make sure that the benefit of that flows through to the communities and doesn't result in additional spending that maybe we don't need, okay? I encourage the school committee, I encourage the local school committees to all work with the selectmen, work with the department heads to do what we can to come to a united front when we go to town meeting. The last thing we need to do is go to town meeting in a divided point of view. That we know there are, the way I put it, there are 10%ers on the left, there are 10%ers on the right, that we will never please, okay? So what I always encourage people to do is strive to work together and come to compromises where we can support and work with that 80% in the middle. Do I think that we can afford as communities to have 5 or 6% assessment increases? Absolutely not. Do I think that if we have 3% annual assessment increases, that the education of our students is going to fall apart? No, I do not. I believe that we have some of the finest administrators and teachers in the state, and I trust in them to work with the budgets that are reasonable considering other departments like police and fire and roads and streets, etc., etc. So I just encourage everybody to maintain a positive point of view and to have us all work together. Thank you.
Is anybody else present to speak during the public hearing for the budget? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing section. Thank you very much. Public participation in general. Is anybody else here to speak on any other topic? Seeing none. Approval of minutes.
Motion to accept the minutes from the regular session of January 13th, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. I think we want to just acknowledge and ask to look at something and then
See the will of the committee is to
So the next topic on your agenda, folks, we were contacted via email by a parent of a middle school student to review a book that is part of the middle school curriculum to read. The parent is not here tonight to speak to it, but she has requested this in an email. What we have been advised to do is to follow the policy that we have as a school, and the next step, if we agree, would be to gather a review committee and have the review committee review this parent request, then come back to us with their determination. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question. If she wanted to come and speak to the committee, would she come and speak to the whole committee or just the review committee, subcommittee?
She was looking to speak to the entire committee.
Okay.
Yeah. Which could go hand in hand at the same time, parallel paths. Go ahead, Emily.
Just a point of clarification. So should we choose not to have a review committee, no action would be taken on this matter? Or I guess it just confused me. We're just discussing whether or not to pursue reviewing
Right.
the request.
It's been suggested that we follow our policy, and our policy is to convene a review committee to look at this request. So what we're looking to do tonight is, if it's the will of the committee to follow our stated policy, to then direct the superintendent to that vein.
And we have to vote to follow our policy, or we just follow our policy because it's our policy?
We need a vote. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm going to, Jason.
I'll defer to Summer.
Nope.
Go ahead, Summer.
I was just going to say, I assume the review committee would be made up of members of our school committee, Silver Lake, or does it also include like the English teacher and the superintendent? Who does the committee?
And that's a good question. I'm going to,
So we've been advised that you could vote to have the text material reviewed as per our policy. And then, the policy is not clear as to the composition of that committee. So that committee could, in theory, be the school committee, or the school committee could determine who would be on the committee, and/or the committee could ask me my opinion as to who should be on the committee.
I would like to ask the superintendent who she thinks should be on the committee.
yeah.
Do we need a motion? If so, I can make a motion that we follow our policy.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on this?
Can I comment?
Yeah.
I just think it's important that we respect concerns of parents, and if this parent has taken the time and effort to send this email and follow up with us, I think we have to do due diligence and form this committee. That's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, the committee members all have a copy of the email. It came in mid to late January. Sure.
So if we're asking the superintendent to put together the review committee, does that review committee make the final decision? Like if the school committee were not on the review committee, could non-school committee members be making that decision without it coming back to us?
So I would recommend that you would probably want to have representation on the committee from the school committee. The review committee would make a recommendation and relay it back to the school committee as a whole.
And then the school committee would decide.
Any further questions or comments? Okay. There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed or abstained? Okay. Thank you, folks.
Are we talking about the committee now?
We'll let her determine the
Would you like to?
review committee.
Okay.
I wasn't planning on it. Would you want to determine the committee right now? Or
Well, yeah, why are we waiting?
I thought we said that we were going to determine the committee.
So what happens next? I guess procedurally, do we just wait for her to send us an email and ask who wants to be on the committee, or how?
I would assume.
I can send an email to see if there's any interest.
Are there volunteers now? I didn't interrupt you.
That's kind of what I
Right, or we could
Okay.
solicit volunteers now.
Okay, well, I thought we were talking about the book tonight, so I emailed Mr. Peel, our middle school principal, and I read the book in preparation for our meeting tonight, so I'm happy to sit on the committee.
Madam Chair, I would request that anybody from the committee who chooses to sit on the review either have read the book or commit to reading the book.
I think it would be inappropriate for somebody to chime in from a review committee who hadn't read the book. I will tell you that somebody shared a horror story with me from another school district that a book was being read that hadn't actually been read by the person requiring it. So, does anybody else want to participate? And actually, that's representation from all 3 towns, so I actually kind of like that.
Who else is on that?
Thank you.
Sorry,
Gordon and Emily Gordon.
That's 2 Halifax and 1 Kingston.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just had to move to Clinton. It's a lovely town.
I don't think there needs to be geographical.
No, they don't. I just wanted to, clarify that.
I will share with you, I have the book on my coffee table in my house as well. I plan to read it as well.
So, did you recommend anyone other than members of the school committee?
So I would recommend that our assistant superintendent be on this review committee. I would recommend that our ELA coordinator, at least one of our principals, our guidance director, an adjustment counselor, 2 to 3 teachers. I'm thinking ELA and maybe history to be part, and obviously school committee membership.
Can I ask Jill?
We could also consider a parent and a student.
I was thinking about your list that you just noted. A librarian or a library media specialist, somebody from that angle or lens as well, please.
In the name of the book is Far from the...
So Far from the Bamboo Grove.
So Far from the Bamboo Grove, just so people know what we're talking about. And thank you for volunteering. All righty, principals report.
If it's okay with the chair, can I allow our student rep to go first because she needs to babysit her brother at 7 o'clock? And I don't want to make her late. Would that be okay?
Certainly.
All right, so Mia Mitchell is our student rep this evening. I'm going to turn it over to her.
Hello everyone, my name is Mia Mitchell. I'm currently a junior at Silver Lake. I'm assuming we all know these past few years have been a little crazy, but Silver Lake has done nothing but an amazing job to keep my peers and I very engaged and eager to learn. It also has built an environment for everyone to feel welcome and accepted. As of yesterday, Governor Charlie Baker has released a scheduled date for the mask mandates to be lifted. Though some may be timid, I really do think this will have a very positive effect on our student body. This will give students the opportunity to really connect with each other and become more comfortable throughout the remainder of the school year. Coming back this school year as almost a normal year, teachers strive to rebuild back normalcy throughout the classroom setting, which has definitely been difficult and a few things have still been off. I am a firm believer that a smile is very contagious, and it has been difficult for some students to find that happiness through a mask. I am very excited for what is to come with this new change. Besides that, I am excited to explain some of the things me and Student Council have been working on. Firstly, we were excited to have our Student Council and Best Buddies ball game scheduled, which we held in Pembroke on March 15th. As a member of both, I am very excited to attend. Secondly, the Student Council and the National Honor Society teamed up to start a blood drive, which we are working on scheduling. In our last meeting, Student Council proudly recognized the members of the Student Council who went above and beyond this semester for outstanding service. We are eager to have a winter conference leadership workshop coming up shortly in Rockland on February 17th. Lastly, we have started planning our March meeting of the week, which will be held on the week of March 14th, excuse me. I am proud to be able to be a part of the community at Silver Lake, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You delivered that update exceptionally well. Very articulate.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Take that, Mia. Thank you.
I know.
It's a tough act for me to follow today. Mine's a little more dry. All right, so first up this evening, I do have our program of studies updates, a little lengthy this year as we work to update language to reflect updates to the state frameworks, as well as student interest in certain courses and trying to run some new electives and options for them. So I think the best way to kind of break it down for the group is to show that we have 6 new courses that we'd like to expand for our students, including digital photography 2, web and app development, game design, engineering design and development, medical Spanish, and AP US government and politics. All of those would be available to students. I have the breakdown in this pamphlet of what grades, any recommendations for prerequisites or not. I think it's also important to note that in terms of the budget, the only cost associated with adding these 6 courses is a small cost for our AP US Government and Politics books, which I think this money is like $800, right?
Yeah.
Which in the textbook budget is chump change. We do have several course description changes to better align with our state frameworks. And then as we continue to review the level of courses that we offer, you'll see that instead of providing CP2 level courses, we're providing grade level or advanced access to courses. We're removing some electives that have been replaced by the expansion of our Project Lead the Way program, which is grant funded, just because those courses now are redundant. And then removing some courses that, again, historically have not run because there hasn't been student interest over the last couple of years in that course selection process. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I know it's a lot to digest. I'd like to give Ms. McGovern, our guidance counselor, the credit for organizing all of our thoughts and ideas and edits and revisions into this document for me. She spent a lot of time framing this for us to review. The first couple of pages, you'll see the new courses, and then the second part of the document are changes to language or course descriptions, classes that we would be removing, or any level changes. Happy to answer any questions before you hopefully vote in favor of our program.
I do have one question where it says the criteria for advanced ELA grade 8 and accelerated grade 7 math.
I believe that's Ms.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Studies. That's all right. Mine's the big one.
You'll have your chance.
So many papers in front of us. Thank you. That's great.
Any further thoughts or questions? Do we want to make a motion?
Entertain any suggestions of course adjustments as made by Principal Gill.
Second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Abstained?
I want to vote, but I just had a question that just came to me as I was looking through this. May I?
I withdraw my motion
Okay.
in favor of my colleague to ask a question.
Just one, it actually kind of, it sort of echoes the question I wanted to have over here. So, where it says like English change prerequisite to recommendation, that just sort of gives a little more leeway to our teachers that are saying, hey, I really feel strongly that the student, like maybe the teacher would have more leeway to advocate on behalf of a student that they felt strongly should be in the class as opposed to the rigid, okay.
Or the alternative, the student or parent feels, I want to take this class. There's not a hurdle for them to overcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So less restrictive, more open.
But we still are going to maintain a standard and like a level. Okay, that's it. All right.
I offer my motion again.
I was going to ask something real quick, sorry.
I withdraw my motion.
The personal finance, when we say change prerequisite, are we saying change prerequisite to reflect that students need to be passing Algebra 2?
Sorry, what was your question?
Personal finance.
Yep.
Change prerequisite, are we saying that, we're saying they must be passing Algebra 2? Is
Right,
that
passing
accurate? Or is that indicating that they can be taking both concurrently?
So currently, they have to have a passing grade in Algebra 2 CP1 or Algebra 2 CP2. So now it's just Algebra 2. And then if they're taking business and money management, they can't also take this course.
Okay. So they can be dual enrolled in Algebra 2 or no?
No.
No? Does that seem like a big leap? I mean, personal finance is a pretty straightforward skill that everybody pretty much needs to get. Algebra 2 is not really used by most of humanity past like age 25.
Well, what I will say is that our personal finance class is typically something that's offered for seniors, right? So they're in the progression of math classes that they're taking. It's an elective that most students are taking it their senior year as an elective. It's not in lieu of Algebra 2, it's in addition to that algebra that they're going to take.
Now, I understand that. I'm just saying if you had a kid, okay. I mean, I don't want to hold up the whole meeting for it, but.
Is there an offering of like a financial literacy course that is offered below senior year?
So we have business, money management, personal finance. We have our credit for life fair that we offer every year for every junior student. So those are the current offerings that we have right now.
I want to channel my Leslie Ann because she's not here, and I know that she would be chiming on what you're saying. But I think, and maybe you already answered this, and I'm sorry, but it does seem like personal finance, there might be a kid who maybe is taking Algebra 2 senior year for whatever reason, and then couldn't take personal finance, so they wouldn't be able to do it. Is it really, I'm a math major. I never had personal finance in high school. Would have helped. But do they really need Algebra 2 before doing personal finance?
Algebra 2 doesn't scaffold to personal finance. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't have to take Algebra 2 to be able to take personal finance, unless the only argument is that you must have taken Algebra 2 because it's required for state reasons before you get into it.
So personal finance is a semester-long course. Algebra 2 is a year-long course. Students need 4 years of math to graduate.
Okay.
So typically, they're not able to take these elective
That's not
courses.
available to them until they've taken Algebra 2. Okay.
So the freshmen wouldn't take
Right.
personal finance.
Right.
Fair enough.
Okay, so
That's what my question was after. It's not, like I said, personal finance, like Algebra 2 doesn't scaffold that. So, okay. All good.
Thank you.
freeze a child.
Keep waiting.
But
I
I
would like to
think
make
they're
a
all good
motion.
questions. They've all been.
Yes, to support the changes to the program of studies as presented by Principal Gill.
Second.
Gordon got it. Gordon got it. Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Thank you.
All right, second up for your approval this night is an update to our student handbook. Those are small this year. The first is to our learning compact, which is on page 3 of our handbook. Anything that's in red would be a new addition to what currently is included. And the idea was to update our learning compact to more closely align with the district's core values. It's been several years since we really reviewed this portion of our handbook. Our school council has spent a great amount of time trying to update the language to be more reflective of our current practices and beliefs. And then the second suggestion is very small. It's to our chemical health policy, which is on page 48 of our student handbook. We want to just add 3 words. If you scroll down a couple paragraphs, as you know, students have the option to enroll in LEAP in lieu of an out-of-school suspension if they are found with a vape or another controlled substance. We'd like to include these 3 words or its equivalent because we have been working closely with outside organizations such as Independence Academy that have a program that our students can attend if they need more support for substance abuse than we have the ability to provide. So for example, they offer an 8-day program that includes a therapeutic program, counseling, learning about substance abuse and substance addiction. It just really goes much more than what we are able to provide with our little homegrown program that we've created. So we want to make sure that we include that in our handbook as an option for students or families who may like to go that route. Again, happy to answer any questions about either proposal.
Go ahead, Sal.
Why does it include the language both inside and outside of school?
Where are you?
Oh, it's all over here. It's the first red line, the second, in the middle of the second student commitment Under teacher commitment, it
Oh, on
says
the
it
learning,
several
on the
times.
learning content.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so I think the idea with the school council was that it's not just in the classroom, it's when you're at athletic events, when you're at, the prom or dances, but also within your community, right? You're representing your school beyond the school day, if you're wearing your Silver Lake gear and whatnot. I believe that was their philosophy behind that.
I guess I just don't see why our student handbook is extending beyond the
So the learning
academics.
compact isn't like a discipline nature, it's very similar to like our core values and our vision of the graduate, right? It's the beliefs and the expectations we hold for our students and the skills and the attributes and the characteristics we want them to have beyond the 4 years that they're here in high school.
So what happens if a student is in violation of something in the learning compact?
So there are no discipline outcomes from the learning compact, that's just sort of like our guiding philosophy. I believe, Dr. Crew might know for sure, but I believe every school has to have one in their handbook. It was generated a few years ago. We sort of took, the state provided here's a format you can follow. We've never really spent time making it our own. And so this was an opportunity this year for the school council to make it more in tune with our district's core values and again, our vision of the graduate.
There are policies within the handbook that would, there are things that obviously they're aligned, so there are going to be some things, there are going to be policies within that handbook that if students do those things, there could be consequences. So I don't want to mislead you either, that this is a statement, but there are policies that also reflect.
Right.
I just want to compliment Principal Gill and her team on the philosophy of trying to eliminate unnecessary suspensions and exclusions from school and trying to offer more educational, therapeutic, and restorative practices to help our students who are in the greatest need. So thank you very much for that.
I just had a question. The very first sentence of the learning compact, I just wondered if there would be interest in it saying just to reach their greatest potential as opposed to their greatest academic potential, as it being a little bit more holistic than just their academic, but their social emotional growth and well-being as a student and learner. I would propose that change to it. I don't know if I can propose a change to it, but I just noticed the word academic really jumped out at me.
To be honest, Emily, that's kind of when I read the first line and then I started seeing outside of school all over this, I was like, that does to me seem.
Yeah, like it's your whole being that we're hoping to develop wonderful little beings into the world, so beyond their academics.
I don't have an opposition to it, but I don't want to speak on behalf of the school council members who aren't here. I can bring it back to them or say yes, and if they have an issue, I can bring it back here. I don't imagine they would, but.
I was just going to say, I'll make a motion to accept the changes as you presented, just to kick that off.
I'll second.
Are we voting them together? The chemical and the learning? Yes. But is your motion including Emily's edit?
I did not. We can make a friendly amendment if we want.
And I don't want this to become a huge thing. I just think that it would be more inclusive to go beyond just the academics.
I don't know, can we vote it? Doesn't the council have to do it and present it to us? Or can we change it?
I feel like we've taken a few things out of order this year, right? We did the dress code policy and the course change before school council, so
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I really don't.
Or we could accept it like with or without the word academic in there.
Or the suggested.
I think they're thinking that it's a learning compact.
Yeah.
Right.
Could we just say suggested?
Not a behavior.
Yeah, it's just suggested. They can choose not to. if there's
For what it's worth, the student commitment also points out to reach my full potential as a student. The teacher commitment is I want my students to be successful and reach their full potential. So aligning the three. to be the more overall inclusive version would probably be the thing to do.
Good point.
We'll make it all work.
Does this have to be in the language, the suggestion? Do you want that in the minutes?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yes, it's part, you don't want it in the minutes, so it's part of the motion.
Yes, I don't know.
I can make it part of the motion. I can say we'll accept it as presented with the suggestion that we drop the word academic before potential in that first sentence. So it's part of it. Then the council can.
I'm sure.
I'll second that, if it hasn't been seconded.
I think it was seconded.
Was it? I think Lucas might have seconded. Yeah, Lucas seconded it.
No further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain?
Great, thank you. After February break, we have our annual curriculum night. We'll be welcoming families of the class of 2026. If there's any current 8th grade parents in the room. So we will provide an overview of our curriculum. This sort of kicks off what we call our course selection season. 8th graders will be able to start thinking about what courses they want to enroll in at the high school, and then our current students will have the opportunity to make their course selections for next year as well, and that's how we begin the process of building our master schedule. We will provide, we are back to in-person this year for that presentation, but we will provide copies of the slides, copy of our program of studies, and I think we're going to try to work with maybe one of our AV club students to possibly record it for anybody who's not able to attend that night. I have two donation requests for you this evening. One is to accept the 2005 Dodge Durango from the Townsend family of Halifax, Massachusetts, to be used as a teaching supply for the automotive program. The second is a Lincoln electric welding machine, spools of stainless MIG wire, and metal lockers from the Pipe Fitters Training Center in Dorchester to be used as teaching supplies in the metal fab program. That's great.
Could I have a,
I will make a motion to accept the donations.
Second.
all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained? And of course, we'll send a letter thanking you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. And then lastly, just a couple of school updates. The PTO, if you recall in the summer, they did a calendar raffle fundraiser event. Members of the community could buy the month, and each day different prizes were drawn. There was dog gift certificates, restaurant gift certificates, and the grand prize was to be principal for a day. So Will Hinckley, who's one of our freshmen, he won the principal for a day, and he took over yesterday. He showed up in his red tie, dressed to the nines. We had a lot of fun. Hopefully I've convinced everybody to go into education. So he kicked off the day by pardoning all parties to school. A lot of high fives, folks on their way in. He declared it a homework-free day, so we had worked with staff in advance to give him the heads up. And then he passed out 200 ice cream coupons at lunch. So, nothing that I've ever done in this role. He had the opportunity to approve some field trips, the student council field trip to Rockland that Nia mentioned earlier. He approved that one. He signed off on a couple of personal day and professional conference requests. He got to, tour facilities and see the boiler room. That's exciting. He loved it. Everybody loves the boiler room. We walked over to central office. We got to see a little bit behind the scenes of how the district runs. He met with Dr. Crew and Mr. Lynch and met everybody in the offices. He was a smart man. He brought some cookies over from culinary. Lesson number 1, you got to wine and dine your people so they take care of you. He observed several classrooms. He met with a couple of the department leaders while we fine-tuned the last of the program of study edits, and he had some input into some of the science suggestions. And then I had to attend a budget meeting, so he got to meet with his admin team. So he pulled a couple of his friends out of class and did a little pizza party with the rest of my admin team. All in all, I think he had a fun day. He asked lots of great questions. He got to meet with Officer Allen. He did an athletic behind the scenes with Miss Jameson, CTE Corps. He was really into it. We gave him a great deal and a master key for the day. So he was a good sport. So it was fun to do.
If he had taken personal finance, he would have known that the first thing you do is negotiate your contract.
Well, he's a freshman. He will have the opportunity to take it in a few years. So that was a lot of fun. We were happy to help the PTO out with their fundraiser. I think that fundraiser alone raised close to $4,000. So win-win all around. I might be out of a job soon. You could hear the round of applause and cheers coming through the school when they announced it. All right, January and February staff of the month. Last month we recognized ELA teacher Tracy McDonald and our nurses aide, Ms. Joanne Dart, for their efforts. And then this month, February, we celebrated English teacher Kelly Griffin and our main office para, Jessica Gilbert. And then just to put a couple things on your radar for some upcoming events. I mentioned before, our course selection process will kick off right after February break. Currently, our high school preschool program enrollment is open for residents of Kingston, Clinton, and Halifax. And in addition to some of the events that Mia has shared, coming up on March 4th is our Skills USA competition that our CTE students will be attending. And that's all. Thank you.
Excellent, wonderful, thank you.
So at the middle school, the first thing on our list is the program studies, the edits. So if you look at the first page, what I try to do is outline the words that we're adding, the words that we're taking away. So in the first one, for instance, where it says cut requirement, everywhere you see the yellow criteria, that was once requirement. And as you move through, you can see similar terminology in there. In order to be eligible for honors geometry grade 9, must receive B- have been in grade 8. And these are the changes that we're doing. Again, we're looking to make our courses more open, more available to our students. And those are the changes. And I want to thank Dr. Prue for her help and support and assistance in looking to make sure that we can have these things more open for our students. And that's kind of the theme of those kind of changes there. The other was the additional elective that we're looking to add, the recreational games, health and fitness. And we're trying to give more options to our students. Again, the more options you have students connected to with their elective, the happier, the more engaged they are to come to school, the more excited they are to go to class, and that adds to the climate and culture of the school. So the more we can do that, the more options we give, the more passionate students are to go to some of their classes. That's what we want for our school, so that's why we're adding that. So take any questions you guys might have.
Now I have a question. So this criteria for English and math, it includes an MCAS performance history. What if the child has not taken the MCAS?
Then that's omitted.
It is?
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's it.
Any other questions?
That was easy.
You get all the easy ones.
I know, that was easy.
Well, I didn't know if it was a firm requirement, so.
I just like the approach that Jim's taken, less tracking at an earlier age, allowing students to explore their comfort zones with curriculum. Even at the middle school level, I think that's a holistic approach. And again, like you were saying, your goal to make it a more welcoming and inclusive place, I think that speaks very clearly to that goal. I'd make a motion to approve the programs and studies as prepared by Jim.
Second.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed, abstained? Very good.
Thank you, everyone. So I'll just go over a few updates that we've had for our school. So first of all, today we had our principal's recognition. So we had roughly 18 students that received the recognition for either achievement, excellence, or citizenship. We're very excited about that. That is something that the teams vote on. So they send the student names down to me, and then I come around and I give a recognition certificate and a pen, and then I call the parents and let them know about their achievement. It's just a very positive way for us to express, the positive things that are happening in school, and that went very well. Had a lot of excited parents on the phone today. One of them, I said, "Oh, this is Mr. Appeal," and they were waiting for the message to continue, and that didn't happen because it was really me. No, this is really me. Talking about their child. I know. I had a couple of those too, like, "Oh, Mr. Appeal, I saw it was you, but I was a little nervous." I'm like, "Oh, it was positive." So no, it was really a good give back, and it is a good conversation. Like sometimes it's easy to lose sight in the routines that we have because there's so many things for us to do, whether teachers, administrators, and have those conversations, to see the smile on the child's face as you tell them, "Great job, this is really an impressive thing." So that was a positive thing. We had our CTE tours happening today and tomorrow. I want to thank Principal Gill and Elliot for doing such a wonderful job showing our kids around. They really do come back very excited. They really get a chance to see what's going on in the CTE program. So I thank them for doing a really great job in showing our students what is available to them here at the high school, and that starts. We have our honor roll celebration tomorrow. The rescheduled Providence Bruins is tomorrow night. And we have Spirit Week next week. We're celebrating Share the Love, Valentine's Week. So starting Monday, it's wear red, white, and pink. Tuesday, offer a flower card to someone you care about. Wednesday is show the love for your team. Dress in team colors. Thursday is dress to impress. And then Friday, show your love for your favorite character. Come in expressing that. One last thing I'd just like to make mention of, I talked about the History Bee, that we brought that back after the hiatus of COVID. We do have students that already started participating in it, and we have 9 students that are qualifying to go on to the regional round. So I'll congratulate our 9 students and congratulate Mr. McKenzie for bringing that back.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Director of Business Services.
Thank you. As you know, on your package, I have a copy of the recent financial. The budget is doing a nice job of maintaining the needs of the school. There's nothing new since last time's report is an area of concern. There are a few areas that we are keeping our eye on. Utilities, we have one area where we are having a deficit. We just want to see to what extent that will be for the year end. Also, under maintenance of equipment, one of the areas we're struggling is we found out that, I noticed that our copies used to come with 3 years of free maintenance, and that doesn't happen anymore, so that's kind of creating some little chaos in all of our budgets. And then Silver Lake is also experiencing some difficulties in some of our special education transportation, just because of the fewer vendors and rising costs. So we're always looking to see if there are other opportunities and try to find the best solution for us. But those are the areas that we're looking at right now. But other than that, we seem to be in a pretty good place. Are there any questions? Let me know if you do have.
Do we have all of the warrants circulated? Are there any still midway through?
No, I think they all made it already.
Okay, great.
Thank you for mentioning that. I did want to mention on tonight's warrant, there is a debt warrant, making another debt payment. And the payment is due in March. We always do it early so that when we make that transfer, that anything goes wrong, we'll just have to.
Tradition.
And that's it.
Christine, I know I've been asking a lot about this, but transportation, and so I guess my follow-up question from ones I've asked previously is, do you anticipate that our budget can absorb the deficit?
Yes, it's something like the budget will be able to absorb that, yes.
Okay.
We'll be okay. But it's just near to keep an eye on. What does that mean for next year? What does it mean for the rest of this year? What does it mean for next year?
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Assistant Superintendent Contract.
Thank you. For the curriculum assessment and instruction update, I just wanted to share that our grade 8 students and teachers are participating in the grade 8 civics pilot assessment in 2018. The Massachusetts History and Social Science curriculum frameworks were implemented, and part of that involved a requirement for civics projects, one of which is in 8th grade. And so this year, our teachers have voluntarily participated in a local level classroom performance task that's aligned with those frameworks. And there's also a computer-based state level performance task that's being piloted by the state, and our teachers are voluntarily participating in that, so just wanted to share. I think it's a good opportunity for students to look at assessment that's aligned with the new framework, both created by their teachers and shared by the state. So just wanted to update the committee on that opportunity. Last year, our middle school students participated in their civics project and worked with their teacher and received a grant to upgrade the courtyard. So these projects are already in place, and I think this participation helps to align what the students are doing with the framework. So that's an exciting opportunity. I appreciate Mr. Pupil and Mr. Jeffers' help in moving that forward at the middle school. The second component is the grant update. As we're speaking about budget, I provided inside the packet just a compilation of the grant funding that the region accesses and a little bit about what those numbers look like for FY22. The numbers for 23 aren't out yet, so I'm sure it would help the committee more if we were able to see all of those, but we just wanted to provide a little bit of insight into the different funding sources that we have and how those contribute to the budget in Silver Lake. Again, where we do have access to the ESSER 2 funding as well as ESSER 3, which was approved, and we're continuing to move forward in identifying our needs and providing support for students as we can. So that's the two updates that I have. There are any questions.
Brian, just a quick question, not in great detail, just your sense. The last couple of years, have you found the grants available to apply for, the volume of opportunity? Has it changed at all? Has it gotten larger or smaller, or?
I think that there has been more opportunity, particularly with the Student Opportunity Act. There's been more competitive grants, and as well as the like the evidence-based programming grants and trying to help students with the learning impacts. There's been more access to funding like that. So at this point, it looks like there's a little bit more funding available.
And you do a lot of the grant writing for a good portion of what we're applying for?
I think there's a lot of people who contribute, but I do the ones that are associated with ESSER, Title IIA, Title IV. Melissa Farrell does the Title I for the district. Marie does the special education ones. Steve Hello works on the technology. Jill helps with the rural aid that comes in and ensuring that's properly done. So it's a lot of different, everybody works together making sure that it gets taken care of. This helps to list out a little bit of who does.
Yeah. But it's a time-consuming effort. It's not filling out a one-page form, and I think people need to appreciate these dollars are pursued by a lot of effort, and we appreciate every dollar that comes in and all of the efforts of yourself and everybody else who's attempting these grants for us and having success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Summer, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. I made a comment at our Halifax meeting on Monday, and I'd like to make the same comment here tonight, just publicly. Sort of piggybacking off of what you said, Paula, I think that people don't maybe recognize the amount of work that goes into it and how fortunate we are to have a team that really has made applying for these grants a priority for our district. And I just, for public knowledge, want to note the dollar amount that for Silver Lake alone, the grant funding that we obtained for fiscal year 22 is $1,665,322.31. So it's certainly nothing to sneeze at. And I thank our team for being so diligent and continuing to apply for those grants. But I also think it's important that we understand that that portion of our budget is funded by these grants, and grants don't last forever. So when we talk about sustainability of the budget and moving forward, just something to be cognizant of that, you know, over $1.5 million of our budget is funded by grants. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And secondly, can you just briefly speak to the civics project that they're doing this year? Do they know yet what they're doing? I just think that the opportunity is really cool, and I think it's great that they're bringing that more into the curriculum. And I think that local involvement in whether it's understanding how your town government works or doing something like upgrading the courtyard and doing more community service, giving back to whether it be the town or the school is super important. And I think it's something that maybe has been, I'm glad to see that it's making its way back into education, because I think it makes our students more well-rounded and a member of their community sort of in a wholesome way. And I just didn't know if you knew what the project was this year.
I don't know what the project is this year. I just know that there's been a lot of resources shared by DESE to promote the sharing of projects among different schools and towns, and maybe Mr. Dupil has more information, but I haven't heard yet what the focus will be.
Okay. Well, if you don't know now, when they complete this project, could you let us know? Because I think it's neat.
So some students are looking at continuing the project outside in the courtyard. Some others looking at other school improvement plans that they think that help the school. But there still is that piece where there are still some students still formulating their ideas, but some of it could be in their towns and the communities. So that's kind of the piece of it. I actually witnessed just like a week and a half ago part of what they were doing as a simulation of an election for a local a local township, and they were out and they were saying what they would do for their town as they're connecting with what do you really want for this project, what are the outcomes, and it's powerful. And I agree with you, Summer. I think that making those real connections and reaching out to some of our town resources is important for our students to understand. And I think that's where the state's going. And I appreciate all the support that Mr. Lynch has been giving us through this project. So thank you guys for your interest.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, Superintendent.
So I'll start off with a district update with a timeline of things that have happened since we last met. Things are changing quickly around us. On December 31st, we received updated protocols where isolation, the big change in the protocol was a change in isolation to 5 days for students and staff who tested positive. And then on January 1st, families were notified of the mask requirement being extended through February 28th. And then on January 24th, we informed our families of a new testing program that would be used instead of test and stay, that would give parents and students, I should say students and staff, the opportunity to opt in to receive a test each week that they would use. And in your packet, you have a more formalized presentation of some of the key slides from the Department of Education presentation. They would test on Thursday, and if they were positive, they would not come into school. That would be shared with via a form with our school nurses, so that the school nurses could be in communication with the families and to advise them in terms of health needs and things of that nature. Opting in is not required. It is exactly that, opting in. And DESE was also careful to note in a follow-up webinar that if in fact a student or a staff member presents symptoms prior to our Thursday, they could take that at-home test in advance and test. So while we have a common date on Thursdays for everyone to test in the morning before, if a student or staff member is concerned that they may be presenting symptoms, they can take that at-home test prior to Thursday. On February 6th, our nurse leader, Carol Beck, shared the update to the protocols as a result of us participating in that testing program. And then I think it was just yesterday. I think it was. Feels like weeks ago. But the commissioner and the governor made an announcement that the commissioner would not be extending the mask requirement after February 28th. I should note that we will still continue the new testing program that we're participating in. And I should also note that masks are still required on buses, as that is a federal requirement regulation. So those are the multiple changes that have taken place, and we have been in communication. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you'd like, we can go through the entire new testing program, but I tried to give you the key takeaways.
I think we're good.
All righty. So now on to the budget, if I may. So the school committee had asked us at our last meeting to reduce our budget by $400,000 and then build back in $300,000, thereby cutting $100,000 from the budget. So we set upon this task, and tonight, in addition to the assessments, which is usually our big focus tonight, we want to share that with you first, prior to the assessments, because we want to follow up with you in terms of what that might look like. So we'll do a quick review of what our preliminary budget is. We will share with you. You also asked us to prioritize any outside of the budget additions, along with funding sources for any outside of the budget additions. And you'll also see an additional $100,000 reflected in this presentation. So, as always, we like to share our goals, and we do consider and want to be mindful of the towns. I want to note what's really helped us this year to help refine our process and help make these difficult decisions is going back to our strategy for district improvement and making sure that we're prioritizing those pieces of the budget that will help us to achieve our goals. And the principals have both done a fine job of including that in their narrative when they presented the preliminary budget. And it also framed our conversations, we've had a couple of meetings to discuss how we go about doing this. So when we look at the preliminary budgets, just some highlights. The total budget, the preliminary budget is an increase of 3.74%. Special education transportation was at a 21.36% increase. Payroll and benefits make up 82% of the $28,264,441 budget. Health insurance in this preliminary budget is estimated at 5%. And it included the several retirements, 2 high school, 1 high school guidance, and 1 middle school retirement. Substitutes were at FY22 levels. There was, we included some shared cost estimates, but that will need to be updated based upon the shared cost budget that was voted this evening. Technology and hardware items, we should note that we moved several items from the capital plan and we put them into the budget this year because they are recurring costs. Grounds and fertilizer, there was a notable increase there of $50,600. Homeless transportation was based upon a 10-year average. So we're going to start with our Tier 1 budget adjustments. We're recently informed of the E-rate grant. We're able to reduce our budget by $15,000 to help purchase FY23 Chromebooks. We have a new recommended rate for Mass Municipal Health Group. It's 3%, not 5%, so that's a reduction of $58,000. We did have a rescinded retirement, so we would need to add back into the budget $35,000 for a total reduction in Tier 1 of $38,000 from the budget. In Tier 2, we started prioritizing our outside of the budget requests. And with each request, we worked with the principals to determine what they could cut, reduce, in order to make that priority happen. Our number one priority across our district leadership team and our principals is the addition of curriculum coordinators. This increase of $12,000 would help us to achieve goal number 3, which is the alignment of our curriculum in EBD format, guaranteeing students access to skin-based programming in all of our disciplines, and will help us to achieve that very important goal. So without an aligned curriculum in our departments, that goal becomes very difficult to achieve. This ask is also closely aligned with effective instructional practices, because these positions would help us as instructional leaders within their departments during department meeting time, professional development time, to help lead groups of teachers in continuing their own professional development. So it is a top priority for this team. Our second priority was restoring the 12-month assistant principal at the high school. And so on the far right, you'll see that in order to meet that increase, taken into consideration is that a stipend for department heads would be backed out of the budget, assuming that these positions would be filled from within, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what the other potential changes could be. A high school wall-mounted display panel, a high school mobile display panel, middle school teaching supplies, high school and middle school homeless transportation estimate reduced. The 12-month assistant principal could be funded through taking the high school treadmill and high school stair climber off of the budget for this year. A behaviorist at the middle school would need to be funded by a staffing reduction. Oops. Before we go on to the other proposals and potential funding sources, we wanted to just take a minute. In the last presentation, we talked about the different benefits of the positions and the types of support it would provide beyond curriculum support and instructional support, and the types of things that we were looking at. What is new to this slide is the committee had asked us what the cost for current staff would be, which would be around $12,300. However, the cost for a new hire would be up to a potential 1 point FTE cut in staffing, and that would depend on the department, the class size, their licensure, and certification. So there's a number of different possible ways that could go, but the maximum amount of FTE would be 1.0 in a department if we were to hire from outside of our staff. So we continued with our outside of the budget requests, and Principal Dupiel is looking for a kind of a split position, a middle school special education teacher and also a middle school reading teacher. The reading component would be paid through Title I, and the special education component would be paid through the budget. The way that the LEA portion would be paid would be by the middle school leasing their copiers instead of purchasing them, which would help us to realize a savings of $19,000. A reduction to the middle school AV line of $2,200. A reduction to the library of $1,800. Middle school teaching supplies would be reduced by $4,000. The middle school PD line would be reduced by $1,200. And middle school guidance would be reduced by $800. To restore the outdoor custodian to full-time, 0.2 FTE. The high school would cut $3,500 in AV line, And they would cut $5,000 in equipment replacement line. The total adds would be $124,352, and the total reductions would be $124,452.
Tier 3?
Yes.
Just part of that, I like the zero-based budgeting angle that we're going with it. The middle school behaviorist, can I just ask what the full-time equivalent reduction would be to offset the behaviorist?
We haven't made that determined. We've had the discussion, and we've asked principal to appeal to consider that priority, but I think one of the things that both principals felt is that they would need to know what, they need feedback as to what types of positions are being filled before they could make a final decision as to what would need to be cut.
It just, I mean, I understand the need for a behaviorist at the middle school. It just would be difficult for me to put my vote behind it without, and I understand the latitude you need, Jim, but the discretion that needs to be handled around this, it would just be difficult to make that vote.
Are we asking questions now? I was waiting.
Yeah, we can.
No, I'm sorry. Can we go back then to the coordinators? I apologize. I thought we were just waiting.
Me too.
I was just confused about this because I had written down that this was going to be a $60,000 increase at our last meeting because it was 4 different positions. So I just wasn't sure.
I think you might be thinking about if the fine and performing arts is a K through 12 position, and then we would be looking at a shared cost position if it was K through 12.
So the total cost for all 4 coordinators would only be $12,275.
In total, not
total.
each for them. And they're just the 7 to 12, so they're not the full, okay.
Because we're making department heads coordinators. So it's only an increase, not a new position.
Well, it could be a new position, that's what you, right? Am I right? Yeah, it could be. And then they would have, no, under this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're hiring somebody, you can't say we're only hiring from within, it's got to be open. So if they hired someone from outside, then they have to pass,
You
right?
can do an internal posting.
Okay. But if nobody's interested, then you have to go outside, got it?
Yes.
Right.
And they do have to have supervisory licensure, so they either has to be supervisory or assistant principal licensure. So, and one of the benefits of, we talked about the K through 12 possibility, especially for the fine and performing arts, was really beyond just the curricular development and coordination, but also an effort to save our instrumental program, especially at the secondary level. Because without instrumental lessons in our elementary schools, our numbers are particularly low in the middle school and high school. And we have talked in our elementary school committee meetings about the need for instrumental lessons by grade 5 to try to save our music programming. But this coordinator, the K through 12 would assist in helping to determine what that would look like in our schools, because every school is a little bit different with how they provide and schedule instrumental lessons. But in our Lighthouse group, we are only aware of our two elementary schools who do not offer instrumental by grade 5.
So I have another question. Under the outdoor custodian, you're talking about cutting 5,000 from replacing equipment. Obviously, we don't want to be cutting maintenance. Can you give us an idea of what that is? Is it something you can definitely hold off on?
It is, and it's also some items that I think through either some booster support or like GoFundMe, we might be able to offset the costs.
Okay. You just don't want to make life more difficult.
I appreciate that. We can get a little creative if the trade-off is worth it.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sal.
No, do we, I guess for Mr. DePiel, We don't have a behaviorist at the middle school right now, so we only have a guidance counselor
So we do
or a
have
psychologist.
a school psychologist, and we do have, a guidance counselor, obviously, but we do not have a behaviorist.
Right.
I believe Halifax.
We have a behaviorist.
Oh, yeah, I think Halifax does have behaviors. We do have an adjustment council that does help and support the 3 sub-separate programs. That position is at 25 currently. And we did have a review done of our 3 sub-separates and what was needed to help and support those students coming in from the elementary, which they've done a really good job in the elementary to support their students. And through that evaluation, they suggested that we have the behaviors, and that continues. And that behaviors can help our students too, to also help acclimate other students prior to needing to go to a sub-separate program, and help our teachers as well. So there's a lot of positives that help with the behaviors position, beyond the study that said that we should be supporting our sub-separate programs with this position.
Can you remind me of the status of the school resource officer in the middle school?
So the school resource officer is part-time, so that they're roughly 2.5, 3 days a week. And they do help and support our students. They do, it's actually Officer Donovan does a great job. He's with our students after school. He does go into our health classes and other classes to help and support. But it's a part-time position. But we also have Richie at the high school too. So Officer Donovan isn't here. Richie does come over to the middle school and help and support us. So it is effective, and both of them work together and are a really nice piece of the community at our 2 schools.
Thank you. Just put those on here. Yeah, thank you.
So we also needed to make sure that we had cut the full $100,000. So we also then began cutting additionally. You'll see that the maintenance of the field is reduced by $20,000. That still allows field maintenance a $30,000 increase. We have reduced the maintenance of buildings by $10,000. That still allows a $12,000 increase to building maintenance. High school teaching supplies, $4,200. High school and middle school mileage reimbursement, each $500 for $1,000. Our principals feel confident that mileage and less travel outside the district, that there's going to still be more online opportunities, and they suspect that this is a line that should decrease. High school professional development line decreased by $2,500. Middle school PD decreased by $2,500. The middle school principal supplies $2,000. High school textbooks $3,000. Health insurance estimate has been reduced by $16,700, bringing us to $61,900, and effectively cutting $100,000 and adding all of those positions.
We didn't double count the health insurance.
I was just going to ask.
That's 2 different component pieces.
Okay.
One of them is the insurance increase by about 5 to 3%. And this is actually just going back to our calculation, because we do start at 0, we calculate our insurance budgets. We start at 0 and build from that.
Okay.
So I felt comfortable with reducing it by $16,700 from that amount that's in the original budget that we presented.
Thank you.
Any additional budget reductions beyond this $100,000 would require staffing reductions.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. In the tier 2, it says in the curriculum coordinators, there's a $2,000 reduction in the middle school teaching supplies, and then there's a $4,000 reduction over here in the special ed teacher and reading. So is that 6 in total? It's in 2 places, so I just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly.
Can you repeat that?
In tier 2, on where the curriculum coordinators are on this first page, there's a $2,000 reduction in middle school teaching supplies, and then on the second page, where the
middle school sped teacher and middle school reading teacher, there's another $4,000 reduction in middle school teaching supplies. Is the total 6,000?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And then the guidance reduction of 800, I mean, I don't need details on what it's for, but we're talking about sort of beefing up our guidance behaviors situation. I'm assuming it's like a supply.
It's just supply related, yes.
Some other considerations is the interest in pursuing, instead of a 9 through 12 department head for arts, as we mentioned, is the possibility of a K through 12 arts coordinator. And that was introduced but not, again, we hadn't made any direction on that, and that would be an additional cost of around $100,000, which is much more expensive than the $12,000 that we had anticipated for the Silver Lake. And again, this is a shared cost issue, not a Silver Lake issue, but I just bring it to your attention because again, looking for direction in terms of how this committee would like to proceed, because it impacts the Silver Lake music program in particular. It impacts the Silver Lake's arts program in its entirety. But again, in particular, we have particular concern about instrumental and music.
And I was going to ask, and I mean, this is kind of unjust, but in the K-12 art coordinator, would that include point 2, teaching instrumental music at the Dennett Elementary School? I mean, we're trying to figure out how to even bring our instrumental music in as such a small percentage position of a full-time equivalent. So I mean it almost unjust, but at the same time, almost hopeful that it could be something we could attempt.
It is something we could attempt. Again, it's a little trickier as a shared cost position in terms of how much FTE is granted to Dennett. Maybe it's something where it's something that's distributed across the elementary schools so that it's a Union 31 way to fund that particular aspect of the position. Again, it gets a little more complicated because it's shared cost and Union 31 needs versus Silver Lake needs, but it's not something that we're afraid to tackle. We think it's important. We're willing to work on this to find a way to make it work and to try to advocate for it, but we just don't know what the will of the committee is for something like this.
Are you looking for direction now, Jill, or?
Doesn't have to be, I can keep moving. I just sometimes pause to make sure. Cost-saving measures, some of our biggest, not our only cost-saving measures, but some of our biggest cost-saving measures are in-district special education programs. And I think Marie did an excellent job of explaining the types of programs we have and connecting how that really benefits our community and our students. The capital plan, where we maintain our facilities funded through E&D. The utilization of grant funds, and Ryan provided you with a summary, which is really our largest grants, but certainly not the only grants that either our administrators or staff apply for to help support our programs. And then facilities improvements, in-house snow removal, the turf tank that cuts down on the amount of overtime to line the fields, the green initiatives, HVAC improvements, and maintaining the building envelope are all ways that we attempt to save money. Some potential budget impacts, state or federal funding cuts like 9C, regional transportation. This is very rare, but should be noted. A reduction in grants like Title I, Title IIA, teacher quality, and Title IV. We typically don't get these amounts until early July. Additional unforeseen unfunded mandates from Desi. Unanticipated special education out-of-district placements and requirements. Loss of students to school choice. Severe weather. We've all lived through it. And insurance. The good news. Our private and parochial schools continue on a downward trend. Good news for us, that these numbers are coming down. Charter school enrollment has also declined since last year. And then we have provided you with a summary of the charter school tuition expenses. If you read from left to right, you'll see the increase in tuition since FY16, all the way up through FY22. And as you read down, if you go down the column of FY22, you'll see the amount that we are reimbursed minus the amount of charter school tuition minus the amount of reimbursement, which is the total expense of charter school tuition. Underneath that, you'll see why this has gone down. You'll see our current enrollment. You'll see that there are fewer students in charter schools since last year, and our overall percentage has decreased since last year.
Still a big number.
Yes.
I think it's important, since we're on camera, to state, because I don't know that they can see it, it's $1 million, the total expense of charter schools. And back in 2016, that expense was $350,000 basically. It's just about tripled since 2016. It's a huge chunk.
Our next slide, I'm going to hand it over to our business director, Christine Healy, and she is going to talk and speak to our assessments.
All right, so everybody just breathe first. As you know, the beginning point of our assessment is the budget. So the budget that we built, that we presented last time, version 1, that is the budget that we're using for this. When the assessment's being calculated, it's a statutory formula. It's in our regional agreement. It's the way we have to assign our costs. One of the first things we do is we subtract our non-net school spending items, which are transportation, equipment, things like that. The next step is the minimum contribution. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts assigns the minimum contribution. We don't have to change that. It changes every year based on the formula that the state uses. So each year you'll see there is a difference. So from last year to this year, there's a difference of the total amount of required minimum contribution among the 3 towns of $300,741. And then you can see the individual impact to each of the 3 towns with that. So at the very beginning, they're starting off with Halifax and Kingston will be paying more than they were last year, just based off of this. Thanks. Once we have the minimum contribution, then we will look at how the assessment's actually calculated. So we have our original budget, less revenue items that we have knowledge of. So we'll be a little bit detail of that as we go on. The next step is after the minimum contribution is used, what is the amount of the dollars to fund our budget that needs to be assessed to the towns? And you can see the breakdown between each town, and then on the bottom it's noted what those percentages are. And those based on the October 1 numbers from October of 2021. So every year this is updated for that information. Once we assign the budget that needs to be allocated after minimum contribution, we add back those non-net school spending items that I had to reduce at the beginning. So we'd add back transportation, and that is net, the full amount of transportation is net against the amount of the regional transportation reimbursement that we receive. We then would add back the equipment that had backed out. We would then add our debt for the current year to that. And then we end up with our total for our assessments for FY23. On the next page, we'll have just the different revenue sources. The next 2 slides will both show the different revenue sources. So one of the first ones that we have is the Pembroke insurance amount that we're receiving reimbursement from Pembroke every year for retirees from 2004 that are still on our roster, or for those that are insured up to us. As you can imagine, that amount is declining because the roster of folks is declining. Then we have our estimated CTE tuition, and actually this year I was able to make a significant increase to that because we have had a real increase in the students participating in CTE, and with the expanded allied health program, it's really made a difference. So I've increased that revenue item to $475,000. Our net meeting agreement or power purchase agreement, I have left that at the same amount because you may recall last year, our hawk flew into a piece of equipment and the equipment was down. So there are things that happen that are beyond. I have actually reached out to see if there's planned maintenance, scheduled maintenance, because it's happening, and there's nothing scheduled for this year. But weather is a factor, and birds flying into the equipment. So I have left that at the same amount that I've used.
Yes.
It was a huge, I think the plant was down for 3 weeks. So that's significant. The next item is shared cost. The shared cost number that's in the $1,020,000 is based off of the original shared cost budget, which has been impacted tonight through the vote earlier. Then we look at our state aid. The state aid this year is at $7.6 million. That's actually an increase from prior years. So I think it's an increase of $464,000 in state aid. And that's not related to regional transportation reimbursement. That's all increase in state aid. And then the next piece to that would be our assessments. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the assessments of the bulk of funding of our budget. Those are all the different component pieces, just showing the pie chart versus what we presented to the last slide. And then the very last page, or the next page this is the nuts and bolts of what it is. This is the nuts and bolts of, based on our current budget and covered revenue items that we are aware of, what this means. And then using the minimum contribution, which has a huge influence on the final amount. If we're looking at just the regular day budget, so this does not include debt. 2 of the towns have an increase and 1 town has a decrease. And then the very bottom of the page shows, including the debt with that change would be from between the towns. Are there any questions on that? Here's what I was left. The total increase for our assessments with capital and based on the operating budget, less any other revenue items, is $360,000, or a 1.8% increase in total assessments, operating and capital. And on the left-hand side, you see a snapshot of those items that we use to compute the budget, the revenue items that were considered. Are there any questions?
I don't know if this is a question for you, Christine, or if it goes to Joe. It was actually on the charter school tuition expenses. It was before you, but I just didn't understand the formula. In FY 2016, we were getting back 200 out of like 600 spent, and then we go down to just 119,000 out of $1 million that it costs.
There's a reimbursement formula that decreases over time. So the reimbursement that we get is less and less and less. So it's not like it's a per student the same amount every year. It's a diminishing return on reimbursement.
Okay.
And then it falls off.
Wait, really?
So we may have students that are out there, we're no longer receiving any reimbursement for that.
After a certain number of years. So like the first year you get X percent, and the second year it's going to go.
Correct.
Okay.
This might be a question for Jason. Yeah. Who drives that? The governor? The legislature? Who determines that? The Department of Education? Who determines the reimbursement rate?
So charter school reimbursement is legislation. House 1 that the governor put out recently has a certain amount that he's suggesting for charter school reimbursement. That doesn't change the formula. Some of you may have noticed we're getting substantially more for charter school reimbursement this year. That comes directly from the Student Opportunity Act because there was language in there to increase the amount of monies that our schools are getting, but it still doesn't eliminate the fact that eventually it drops to 0.
But the Student Opportunities Act is federal?
No, Student Opportunity Opportunity Act is a state piece of legislation. We're in year 2, we're entering into year 2 of 6 in FY '23. We're in year 1 right now.
You just answered my next question. I'm sure that sunsets at some point, right? Like it drops.
So those changes in the Student Opportunity Act will continue on.
Oh.
But unfortunately, as Christine mentioned, this is the 3rd iteration of the formula for reimbursement for charter school loss. And all of those have dealt with the fact that eventually you get $0 for any students who leave your district to go to a charter school. So one of the formulations had it over a 5-year period, but it was smaller amounts per year. Another iteration was a smaller period of time, but a lot more money up front, and then it fell off after year 4. So the Student Opportunity Act, again, is trying to deal with this situation. So our net loss this year is, again, $1 million, so it's stable with last year. We're not increasing the loss to charter schools, but it's temporary. It's temporary.
Thank you for that clarification.
One thing that I forgot to mention is in this calculation, we have the debt payment that we're making for 23. And as you may recall, October of 2020, we did refinance our debt, and that resulted in a savings of $45,000, $42,500 to the FY '23 assessment. We would have paid if we had not refinanced.
So I'm trying to get my head around all this, and I'm actually struggling a little bit. So obviously, what we voted share cost tonight is the additional items are not in here.
Correct.
So that's going to massage those numbers a little bit in the upward direction.
For instance, on 2 of them would increase our budget by 100, I think it was 35,000, but they would also have half of that coming back as a revenue item in our shared cost. So that would be a net increase of 65,000 to the assessments. 67,250, I think, actually.
And if, this is a number you're not going to have, I guess without the shared cost vote impact tonight, what is the overall budget increase right now?
So the items that were discussed tonight, the meeting that we had, so I believe it's
like after the things that we talked about.
$160,000 increase to Silver Lake's budget.
Right.
Of that, 135,000 is shared cost. So an increase of 160,000, and then a revenue source coming in of 60,000.
Right. Bless you.
So we're in the neighborhood of about $100,000 net increase to what then will have to be assessed for those 3 years that were voted earlier tonight.
Okay, so before we do that adjustment, we talked about some different things in here tonight before doing anything beyond what you suggested here. What is that overall budget number? What is that percentage increase over last year?
I have not had a chance to calculate that since the items that were voted. Is that what you're asking me, or you're asking me?
No, and I guess I'm being kludgy, and I apologize, but it's because I'm not clear. You've offered up some options on, I love the net idea, as you indicated earlier. You're adding things and taking things out, painfully taking things out. And that's like a zero-sum end game. And I guess I was thinking there were some other adjustments that you were talking about here.
So in this package, there are some reductions that we could make, $100,000 reductions that we could make.
Okay.
That are outside of the plussing, the adding and subtracting. I mean, adding positions or increasing positions, but then reducing costs. So those all pretty much netted out to zero. We did have $38,000, and that's 60.
Actually,
$100,000.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, it just in a general sense, not dime for dime. If we add in what was voted in the share cost meeting before now, and we take into consideration what you've done here, we're sort of at the same number that we left the last meeting at. Am I kind of digesting this right, or?
Because we
I think
were in a
we're
meeting,
still
we were
hot, the
talking
budget will
about,
still be increased.
we were looking at, and I didn't bring my, I thought we were getting a new copy of the budget, so I didn't bring it, but didn't we, at the end of the last meeting, we were looking at $300,000 in new costs that we had approved, which I just didn't write down. I didn't bring the sheet with me. But we had approved about $300,000 and, well, we didn't approve it.
There's a list.
Requested in new expenditures. So that we should be at a $300,000 increase, but then you've cut 100, so we should be at a $200,000 increase over what we were presented last month. Does that sound right? And I believe that included the HR, the shared cost portion of the HR director, I think. I didn't bring my paper where I had written that down.
I thought we were asked for some cuts.
Yes.
And then,
$400,000.
well, things that would be added back.
Correct.
And the way this was done, so you have about $100,000 in cuts that we could make.
Right.
And then to get some of those priorities, those items that were hoped to be added, we have a set of reductions that would match those. So we haven't increased the expenses in the budget by $300,000. The items that we're looking to add to the budget, we
I
have
think some of
offset.
that cost is coming in through the shared cost budget adjustment. So, right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So is your question that you want to know what the total budget increase would be, Paul? The percentage of budget increase if we did all of these items?
No, I think I'm good. My sense was we were sort of net where we left the last meeting. If anybody has any questions or comments, go ahead, because I'm still trying to put mine together.
I think the board would like to speak.
There's a couple of questions from the audience, so you're aware.
Okay.
Vice Chair wants to take over.
Gordon, I don't know who.
Yeah.
Gordon, do you want to?
So your number that you were asking for, if you include the 165, it'll take your total budget from $28,264,441. You add the 165 to it, brings you a total of $28,429,441. So your overall increase with that added in is $1,183,066 from the previous year's budget.
I was coming up with the same thing, but then wouldn't you take away 100 from that the net of this 400 and 300?
So we do have $100,000 in cuts that are proposed in this package that are still in the budget that would reduce that amount. Correct.
I almost feel like my legislative report is like about to burst out of me. Because so much of it has to do with House 1, the governor's budget.
Do you want to share anything?
I mean, just from,
I don't want to see you explode over there.
we are getting over $400,000 more from the state this year, so the net increase to the towns would be, if the $1 million, Gordon's good with numbers, so it'd be about $600,000 change in increase, and that's from House 1. The governor's budget is always amended and usually increased when it goes to the House and to the Senate. Mm-hmm. Let's admit that the real and final last say is the way the joint committee that reconciles the House and the Senate's budget. I wouldn't be surprised if we see circuit breaker fully funded. Yes. We're also looking for additional money. Yeah. We're also looking for additional funds because the governor used this year's transportation funds to come up with regional transportation, which we know was artificial because of just the way schools ran this year. So we're looking for additional funds in regional transportation that would increase that line as well. Right now, they're using a 4.5% statutory inflation. That's the highest level they can use. Whereas both chambers have acknowledged that 5.9 is probably a more realistic increase for the Chapter 7 funding, so we could see additional revenues come in there too. So I acknowledge the burden on the towns, but I want to also make sure that we're clear that the number we're seeing from the Chapter 70 funds, from regional transportation, even potentially from charter school reimbursement, we may see only rise to support us even more.
That's a huge impact on what we're talking about.
I understand.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Erica.
I was just going to ask a question, a housekeeping question. When do we need to do our final vote on this again? It's not next
We
month.
would do it in our March meeting because we have
It
to
is
45 days before the town's first town meeting.
Okay.
Gordon?
I was wondering if the committee would entertain if the legislature and the governor pass an increased amount of Chapter 70, that they would revote the assessments at that point in time and recalculate if it lowers the assessments.
What I do want to mention is that we traditionally, our assessments are based on this information, what we're finding on the governor's numbers, because we do not usually have that final information until well after our budget's voted and our assessments are voted, and sometimes in town meetings have happened. So all those votes traditionally happen after we've voted our budget and an assessment, which is based on House 1. So that's something we traditionally do not do that, go back and revote our assessments or revote our.
Is it just well, here you've got like, you know, we've had all these years of doing it a particular way, and if we change it, we're benefiting or disadvantaging one town over another. It's not dictated by the regional agreement specifically, it's just been our practice.
I would have to go back and I don't recall the regional agreement system.
Yeah, I don't either, and I usually have to call.
And it's usually timing, because if we need to go to a budget by mid-March, I don't have the luxury of waiting until those numbers come. And then each year, there's always a difference. What you see here is not what the final vote is, it never is. So usually those variances are minor, but there are times where it could be a more significant. If we had a confirmation that there was some information that we could use, we might be in a position to use that before we voted our assessment.
Oh, boy. Gordon again.
Just one more comment. There was a year that the minimum contribution numbers changed drastically. That ended up being a municipal agreement between Plimpton and Kingston to repay that.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it's not unprecedented that the assessment has changed.
Right. That was an error in calculation, right, that was found?
No, they made the state made a significant change in their, the numbers from the governor's numbers until the final budget was voted. There was a significant change.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so there's precedent for it. All right, so what this committee needs to do now, and it's kind of it's a very kludgy situation. Perhaps there is more money coming to offset some of the increase the towns are looking at. And I'm sorry, Jason, again, give me a time frame for that. Our next meeting is March 10th.
So as Christine was saying, and I totally understand what Gordon's saying, but the track record of the legislature to get a bill to the governor to sign by June 30 is not very good. I mean, we could be looking at a budget that doesn't get passed until the summer, right?
Okay, so we're in the same spot we are.
We are. I mean, the chances of us getting new numbers that would be actionable for what Gordon's asking for, which I think makes total sense to give the best numbers we have, if we have time to do so, I don't see that happening. So I can't give you a date that would satisfy your question and would satisfy a regional agreement to have the numbers out to the three towns in time for them to post for town meeting.
Okay, so what is the committee thinking we should do? Because go ahead.
I mean, I think we need to see, the final budget, final numbers, with everything included, the share costs, obviously. I don't think we can vote any terms of making additional cuts. I mean, we've been through this before. We know that, you know, we can put part of athletics on the cutting block, put foreign languages. I'm not saying I want to cut any of these things, and I don't think we should. I wouldn't support it. But what I'm saying is, if we had to do it next month for whatever reason, then we could go through next month, I think, and start making cuts. But I don't personally think that we should direct administration to come back with a list of those cuts at this point.
So what you're saying is look at the budget as it is now with everything baked into it and
vote and deliberate it next month, that's all I'm saying.
right.
Yeah, I personally don't want them to do anything else to the budget other than assemble it, include the shared costs that we voted earlier, and have a new version of the budget that we can then go through and deliberate on. I mean, if other people want to deliberate items in the budget, by all means. I just personally, I think waiting until next month and looking at it when it's completed might be the better way to go.
So are you looking for the updated budget number would be, and then how that impacts the assessments?
I think we'd be looking at version 2. We'd be looking to see a version 2.
So version 2 would be including the positions that were voted earlier tonight, and then also including the $100,000 in cuts that were outside of the adding and subtracting.
Yes.
And I think the other thing under this tier 2 prioritize, where we have priorities, I think we already agreed that we want those priorities. The one thing, and Jason alluded to it earlier about the behaviorist, I'm not sure that I'm willing to reduce another FTE. I don't know what that is, and would want to have input from Mr. DePiel, obviously.
Can I clarify my position on that? I believe Jim needs that position in this building. I would prefer that if we could just cleanly fund it. But I mean, if knowing Jim and how he's run his building all these years, I trust him that if he says he has a position that would offset this, that I'll support the request from the middle school in honor of that.
I mean, I think, you know, I say this every year, and I've been saying it for so long, you know, the sustainability of this budget over time is just going to continue to be more challenging. And we've kicked the can, and we've kicked the can, and we've not gotten copiers, and we've not gotten textbooks, and we've cut so many things. This clearly is very, you've gone down to a very granular level, and we appreciate that. And I get it. I know the next step is going to be a staff decision. You know, clearly you've done everything. You've turned over every rock, it appears, to come up with savings. You know, at some point there's no more savings to be had. You can only, you know, wring it out so far. I don't know if the committee has any other suggestions. If we come back to the table on March 10th to see a fully baked budget and make some decisions from there, there is the possibility we would have to perhaps meet again in March, which isn't uncalled. We've done that many, many years. So it's potentially 2 meetings in March.
I like your plan, Madam Chair.
I mean, I kind of need to see the. Go ahead, Emily.
I'm just wondering, so we also have that additional like 100,000 that you cut without, numbers is not my strength, so apologies if I'm misunderstanding, but the additional, but like, I guess going back to like the cutting of position, like, is there an argument to be made that post-pandemic, we should just be advocating for behaviorists without cutting positions in the middle school where kids have been out of school for so long that we don't need to be cutting a teaching position or a full-time position? I mean, I think, you know, we talk about standing up in front of town meeting and making an argument. I would find that an easy argument to make to add that 60,000 back in to get a behaviorist in the middle school over some of the other areas of the budget, because I think we've all lived through this pandemic and mental health. We've seen either firsthand or personally, so I would say I wouldn't want to cut a position in order to add that, I just want to add it.
Can I just say one thing real quickly? I know it's
I'm
our
going to
turn.
ask you to hold it just for 1 second, Sheila. I'm going to use the word funny, and I don't mean that. I'm going to be brutally honest here for a moment. And it's, we've sort of alluded to it in some of the times. We're almost at a crossroads where we have two towns that can support the budget the way these students should be serviced in this school system. And then we have my town, which for no fault of its own, is going to struggle, quite frankly, to support this budget. I don't pretend, I am not King Solomon. I don't pretend to know what the right answer is here. I'm not going to cut a baby in half. But it's not a philosophical difference. It's not, it's solely, we're struggling here because we have a financial hardship in Halifax. And we can't be comfortable with a budget that is bare bones. May have some things added to it, but really, really should be added to it. And we're not able to say, yeah, let's vote this budget and put it forth in all three towns. And I am, as everybody else at this table, I'm sure, I am incredibly saddened and upset about this. And there's really, it's circumstance. There's nothing that can be done about it. And unfortunately, we are saddled with coming up with the right answer for the school system and then going to our towns with it.
So just real quickly, I just wanted to say that Kingston has a huge bubble coming up to the middle school as well, that there's 160 students coming up. I just wanted to just make you guys aware that Kingston does have a huge bubble of students coming up to the middle school. I did say that before. I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware that that is a huge situation. And a lot of that, we have a behavior. So I think that going into it and not having those supports as you have a large population of students coming in, I just wanted to say that that is something that Kingston has coming up for the middle school coming up. So I just real quickly, and to your point, I just want to say, putting things bare bones is true, because liability-wise, if we don't have a director of human resources, I'm afraid of what will happen sometimes. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. These guys have done an amazing job, but there are things that are necessitated and are bare bones, and I can't agree with you more that this is a bare bones like type of situation, and I really feel like we need to fight for what we can do for our towns, but I completely understand what you're saying. So I just wanted to let you know that it's hard, and I get it, but it's just a tough situation when it comes to three towns in three different areas, So thank you.
Carl?
I'd just like to try to put something in perspective from a general point of view, that we talk about a lot of specific numbers, et cetera, but we all know the term Proposition 2.5. Proposition 2.5 basically says that you can have bottom line expense increases of 2.5%, then you add to it new growth. In the case of Kingston, that usually adds about 0.5%. So we can support bottom line 3% expense increases. And I try to look at only expense increases. Yes, I look at the assessments, but some periods of time, one town is going to be going up, another town's going to be going down, etc. So I think it's important to keep in mind the bottom line. The bottom line expense that you're talking about here now is right around 4%. And what you do when you have a 4% bottom line is you have two choices. You can go to the communities and go for a Proposition 2.5 override. You can do that so often. You can't, in my opinion, you can't convince any community to be doing a Proposition 2.5 override every single year, because you need 4% increases to run your budgets. The other thing you do is whenever you're having 4%,
yeah, maybe we can somehow make it balanced, but that means I've got to tell my police department and my fire department and my streets and roads and parks, I'm sorry guys, you're limited to 1% this year. I, more than most people here will ever realize, I get accused from a lot of the other government people in Kingston of always supporting the schools at the risk of everybody else. But I just would like us to keep in mind that, you know, anytime you do a bottom line expense budget of more than 3%, you really are putting yourself in putting us all in a difficult position. And never mind, if, you know, when I look at, and my eyes are getting old, but I think that assessment says 2.4% for Kingston and the assessment. Well, Kingston this year can probably live with that, okay? But I also sympathize with Halifax saying 5%. I suspect they cannot live with that. And to get back to what I said before, we're one big happy family that has to find a way of making it work. And I will reiterate that I believe, and I think what Paula was saying, I almost admire it. I sit here year after year, and I see us talking about $10,000 here, $15,000 there, $20,000 here. One of these years, I'm afraid we're going to have to bite the bullet and take some of those $100,000 items and say, hey, I don't want to cut any staff in teaching, administration, support services, anywhere. But, you know, that becomes a reality sometimes. Thanks.
Jason?
So, appreciate your words. Just want to make sure, in the time that I've been a member of this committee, and I think I'm the second most senior member, we have never asked for a Proposition 2.5 override. There have been many years where we brought in an overall budget of under 3%. There will be years when we bring in a budget that's going to be over the 3%. And I understand the fiscal conservativeness. I have never been part on either one of the committees I serve on of a budget that was above a 3. However, I am not going to ignore the needs of the students and ignore the needs of the school, especially as we emerge from the past 2 years. And we really, instead of doing all these painful cuts, we admit to the towns what we need to have a high-quality education for all students in Silver Lake.
I have a question. So right now, the way that it's my understanding, and Gordon, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the proposed budgets for both the elementary and Halifax and Silver Lake, as they stand right now, will force us into an override without even talking about the operating budget of our town. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the 2 schools alone are going to push us to an override the way the budget stands right now. Personally, I don't think an override is palatable, nor will it pass in Halifax at town meeting. So my question is, if the budget remains as is, and we are put in a position in Halifax where we need to vote an override, and it does not pass, what happens? Like to the school budget. So I guess my question is, because we're in a regional agreement, are we bound to pay the school budget, so therefore we don't have a choice in the town but to cut police, fire, highway, other services?
I'm going to let Gordon speak, but that's what the regional agreement dictates. That's being part of the region.
The regional agreement requires the town to fund Silver Lake. It doesn't require the town to fund the elementary school. So the largest department in the town is the elementary school. Police is already at minimum staffing, fire's at minimum staffing, highways at minimum, council on aging, library. So you're going to make massive cuts at the elementary school. Okay. And that's the only other large item in Halifax's budget. So
So I know that, but I guess I was just more concerned about, like, if it's like, listen, we have no other choice but to pass an override and the town says no,
And
then we just have to gut our elementary in order to continue to fund police, fire, and other services the town needs.
Possibly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we're almost sitting here airing dirty public laundry for Halifax. But it's, no, I say that and I'm not trying to be funny. It's an important discussion for us to be having in public. This is extremely painful and uncomfortable that our situation is causing this struggle that we're having. Gordon.
Just one thing to add so the public's aware. We did ask Representative Lenatra and Senator Mike Brady to come to a meeting with the Board of Selectmen tomorrow at 1. The superintendent, Paula, both have been invited. I know the Superintendent Prue is going to bring some of her staff to answer some of the questions that we have. We would be in a tough position anyways in the town, but the out-of-district special needs transportation, which Silver Lake sees an increase on, is a massive increase to the town for this fiscal year and for next fiscal year. And that is something I'm hoping that we can get some help with.
And I just want to say one comment about that. I cannot thank you enough for always thinking out of the box and shaking every tree to try and come up with a solution, whether it's a monetary question, any other sort of question. You have always been a tremendous asset to this region and the town of Halifax, and I mean that sincerely. And I appreciate every effort you make immensely. Gordon?
So some of my comments or questions are probably going to reveal or signal just some of my newness in doing this. To me, it appears that, so we've got the hard problem of what to do immediately. And the underpinning basis of that are the struggles in Halifax. And I would guess that the struggles in Halifax relate to particularly the different underlying sort of business tax base and things like that. And there's literally nothing that this group can do about that. I 100% agree with Summer that like a 2.5 override is not going to fly. I would have a real struggle even supporting that in an era of 7% inflation and people coming out of the pandemic and everything like that. But we have a model problem overall, which is the model being that Halifax is a problem. I don't think that you can really kind of rely on Halifax to go fix itself in the near future. We are all one happy family stuck together, or unhappy family, or whatever you want to call it. The only thing we ever talk about here really is cutting anything. Is there nothing at all that we can do to monetize and raise revenue that is not tax related, that is somehow positive? I mean, we're talking about like $2 million that we need to somehow like monetize out of the school. I'm not even sure what the implications of that would be, but do we never talk about that? Can we do something about that? Can we, try to sort of lean forward in a business sense about monetizing the assets of the school district and raising revenue somehow?
It's a wonderful mindset we have over time put efforts in. We looked at solar panels. There was a lot of work done on solar panels, only to find out it wasn't feasible. We've looked at, of course, you can't have advertising or anything like that because it's a public school. Certainly the energy,
Power purchase agreement?
yes, that was a huge revenue. That's probably the biggest revenue item we've done, we're very limited. We spent a lot of time for a number of years trying to come up with ideas.
We do draw some revenue with our CTE program, as Christine highlighted earlier this evening, and even some of Marie's programs, when there's capacity, we sometimes tuition children into that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we'd be open to ideas, but we really, a number of years in a row, really tried to shake the trees, and a lot of work was put in, and we're a school system, we're not.
Right.
You know, that thought process is always open to new suggestions, times change, et cetera, but we struggle to come up with anything that's going to be meaningful.
That we actually looked at canopies for the parking lot with solar panels.
And being part of regional schools, we're less than the majority of the state. But even as far back as Senator Kennedy, the predecessor to Senator Brady, and currently working with Senator Moran and Rep. Lenatra, we're trying to come up with some sort of revolving account for assessments, where if towns have a low assessment, like you can see Plimpton this year has a negative assessment, that there would be incentive for municipalities to put those dollars into a revolving fund, and the state would potentially give a percentage match, maybe just like a 10%, to encourage that investment for a year where the assessment might be a 4 or 5 or a 6. We've been through this before too, where Silver Lake has come in with a budget of a 2.3, and Plimpton's been hit with a 6, 7, or 8% increase.
Yeah.
You know, someone said it earlier, like we all take turns with these radical changes in the assessment, and the state's aware of it, but trying to get traction when you're not represented by the majority of the votes in the legislature and in the Senate makes it very, very difficult to get a sympathetic ear to the plight that we're going through. But Rep. Lenatra and Senator Moran continue to be helpful. I still have some difficulty from time to time getting Senator Brady, but Senator Kennedy was a wonderful ally in that goal. This is something we've been working on at Silver Lake for over 8 years now. It's coming up with some sort of assessment, stabilization, revolving account for the municipalities.
Okay, well, and thank you for that. I think we need to give some direction for our next meeting. I'm going to throw an idea out there. If we come with the next version of the budget with the things that we voted earlier this evening, et cetera, baked in, if we then have some ideas as to coming down 100,000, coming down 200,000, coming down 300,000, I would encourage us to have those ideas, because some of us may need to say we need to cut here or there. And we're going to have just a debate and a discussion and come up with a version of the budget that we may meet one more time to finally vote. But my personal feeling is we need to have some possibilities of decreasing the budget and what those would be. And this committee is going to have to consider those.
I do a point of order. Is there any way that the shared cost budget could be reopened if that was to come down, to then be able to maneuver the shared cost budget so that they're not taking such a hit?
Well, and that's part of what the discussion may be.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
You're welcome. But yeah, unfortunately, just the number we're at now, almost 4%, might be the number that the committee wants to go forward with. But the number may be something smaller than that the committee's going to want to go forward with, and some hard decisions are going to need to be made. Sure.
And I'm new to sort of all of the pieces here, but we've talked about not having done the override since, you said you had the 2.5 override in a long time.
I don't think we've done one since the building project originally happened for school purposes.
For school purposes, yeah. I feel like we're at a point, like every year, from what I hear, people referencing the past, and this is only my first sort of full year doing this, where we're scrimping and skimming to try to get to the 3%, like, because we're not starting at a place, it's like, if your grocery budget's $100 and you always have to spend $120, like you just need your budget to be $150 so that then it is only 3% each year thereafter. Like I feel like we need a year where we just say our budget just has to be higher. Like then 2% after that is more feasible. But it just seems like we're just going to keep getting to this. And as a taxpayer and a citizen, like I don't want to keep cutting programs. Like I live in this town because it's good schools. And I feel like we have to have a serious conversation. And I understand that Halifax is not in a position where these things are like even remotely feasible, but like, I just am very wary of even asking this, like we asked them to go back and cut already. And I feel like they came back with a lot of cuts. And if we have to cut a full-time person to get a $60,000 behaviorist, then my guess is that that's what we're cutting now is people. I mean, I don't see how we're starting to cut other things. And that's a massive disservice to our students, I think, if we start to now take the caring adults in their buildings away from them. So I don't know, I guess I'm just...
You're spot on. Your comments and your position is not somebody who's new and doesn't understand. You're spot on and you understand completely.
That's sad.
Jason.
Even as someone who has no appetite for further cuts, I think your recommendation, Paula, is a prudent way to proceed. So we can have all the information at hand next time we sit down at the table.
And have options.
And have options in case we want to entertain, even if they're not sustained, those conversations. So I support, Madam Chair, your suggestion to have some list of cuts that we can have for next meeting, just to be prudent. We've been to meetings before where we thought everything was figured out, and life threw us a curveball. I'd rather be prepared and not need it than the other way around.
Agreed. Eric?
I just want to add, and I can't remember how long ago it was, years of blending together, these years on 2 school committees, but it wasn't that long ago where we had to cut a few $100,000 here, and we asked Joy, we instructed her to come back with cuts other than people. And we cut all sorts of things here. I don't remember if we actually did cut people as well. I can't remember if we did or not. But we cut all sorts of things, like the maintenance on the grass. The grass turned completely brown. The fields were not really taken care of. I mean, we were cutting a lot of things. And then the next year, as we're adding things back in, it looks like, whoa, we've got this huge increase. No, we're just now paying for the equipment that we completely ignored for the past couple of years. Now we're paying, we have to totally rebuild fields that we've ignored. You know, so making cuts, when you're cutting people, we're cutting instruction to the kids. When we're cutting non-people, we're cutting things that we should be spending money on. We're not saving money. We're saving money for that year, but you're going to pay double the next year or the year after. So we might, and we've had this issue, and no offense to Halifax, but we've had this issue with Halifax for as long as I've been on this board. They've always, come and said, we can't, you need to cut it down, cut hundreds of thousands of dollars out of your proposed budget. Sometimes we did, and sometimes we didn't, but when we did, it hurt, and it still hurts. So, and I don't know the answer, because it's not going to get any better. Like they said, and if the Prop 2.5 doesn't, if they have to go that route, if we vote the full budget and they have to go that route and it doesn't pass, that means decimating their own elementary schools, which will affect us here as well, because those kids are going to be coming up here. So there's no really good, it's a really crappy situation to be in. But I'm just very concerned about making cuts again, because I lived through this not that long ago here. It doesn't work.
Agreed. Okay. Let's move on. I think you're comfortable with what we'd like for next time. And if not, certainly let me know. But I think we need to have an updated budget with the numbers baked in and some options as much as we're not going to want to have an appetite for them in case we go down that road. So we can hammer through.
Would the committee like to reconvene the joint committee after that meeting? Not necessarily.
No, I wouldn't pull that trigger yet. Thank you for that question, but I wouldn't pull that trigger yet. All right, folks. New business, old business, we have nothing for that tonight. Report of Silver Lake Educational Association.
Hi guys. John had conferences tonight. So I am Ashley Ferrara. I am the vice president of the high school. I teach English here and I coach soccer. I'm happy to be speaking with you tonight. I just want to say, Gordon, I like where your head is at and thinking about like different ways to raise money, right? Like, for example, when we had to get new lights for the field, which was what, like, Eric, $150?
180.
180? Yeah, okay. The community, like, came out to do those things for us, and like, a lot of the line items that are cut every year have to do with athletics, and people are usually willing to make donations for things like that. So I thought it was a good idea. I don't know if, like, we have more thoughts like that, but thank you.
Turf field, woo!
Woo, yeah, well, exactly, like, I'm sure people would donate. Happy to accept donations, right? Absolutely, at all times, so.
We'll send a thank you note.
Yeah. I will write it. Actually, I also want to thank everybody who spoke during like the public budget portion and just saying that during town meetings that you advocate for things at the high school, because speaking as somebody who went to Silver Lake too, so I've been here a long time, but sometimes it feels like Silver Lake is like the stepchild of the district because none of the towns sort of want to deal with the budget. Obviously, they are forced to. So it's just nice to hear people saying like they'll advocate for Silver Lake in the town. So just appreciate everybody kind of working together on this. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, admin review, obviously we have met a few times and we reviewed contracts at the joint meeting and approved those contracts at the joint meeting earlier this evening. Thank you everyone for that. CTE, Chris is not here tonight. He was a little under the weather, so I don't have any sort of report for that. Chairman's report, the correspondence, in addition to the email on the request to review a book. The other thing that I've shared with you is the annual report that I submitted for us on behalf of Silver Lake for the annual reports from the town. And I know there was, I don't know, whatever, mine is not that long, so there's other annual reports attached to that.
Sorry, Paul, I didn't know if I was supposed to give the whole annual report for the town of Kingston, because that's the only one that's been submitted yet. So I should have just given you a letter, but I gave you all.
Yeah, oh no, that's fine.
Okay.
More is better than less.
Okay.
Thank you. Legislative agent report, anything in addition to the good news that just seems a little too far down the road for us?
I also want to talk to Summer about this. You know, we had come together as a committee and said that we didn't like the guidance that the commissioner had about the 80% rule when that was in play. We voiced our concern to how it would split potentially the student body and how we would prefer all students to be treated the same. There was other school committees across Massachusetts who were also advocating for that position. And when the new guidance came out on January 10th, which is now like 7 iterations ago, they had removed the separate but equal. If you made it to the 80%, they were going to allow all of the students to take off their masks. And I just wanted to say your advocacy for that was heard and listened to. In the governor's budget, House 1, our advocacy for hold harmless was also put into Chapter 70 for this year, right from the start with the governor. Unfortunately, the per pupil minimum increment is set at $30 this year, which unfortunately does impact all of our schools, including Silver Lake. Working with Rep. Lenatra and Senator Moran, I've asked them to propose an amendment when it gets to their chambers for $100 per pupil minimum increment. Again, that would not be a huge increase in the amount of money we see in Chapter 70, but it would be something that could help alleviate the local burden. Recently, we had Joint Rule 10 Day. That's when bills that have been sent out to different committees either get pushed forward to a vote in the legislature or they get spiked until next year. One of the bills that I've been advocating for is the Universal School Meals Bill. This would extend the current policy of free meals at schools for all students. We've also extended this to the federal level, not just asking the state to do it. There's two bills at the State House right now, House 714 and Senate 314. That would basically have the Commonwealth take over the burden of the excess cost of feeding our children here. But I really believe that burden should fall upon the federal government. So I've recently written a resolution that was sent by Massachusetts to the NSBA, also asking for Congress to pass the Universal School Meals Program Act of 2021, which would amend the Child Nutrition Act of 1966 and the Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Act to make breakfast and lunches free for all children. We know that kids who eat perform well academically or perform better. We also know that they have less behavioral issues. We also know the increase in cost. Gordon alluded to it because of inflation for all of our families, and this would take one piece of the family budget off the table for our families. So I hope you guys will support me in pushing for this program going forward. MASC has a lot of offerings coming up soon. Tuesday, February 15th at 6:30 online. There's collective bargaining basics, and it's held by 2 school committee members who are also school attorneys. So if any of you would like to attend, that's free to all of us.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. It's Tuesday, February 15th at 6:30. It's called Collective Bargaining Basics, and it's being run by 2 school committee members who are also school attorneys. Yes?
And Jason, they do record them and offer them, no?
So sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't.
Oh,
Considering, and it has to do with the sensitivity of the material, and since MASC is not a public committee, it's a private organization to support school committees, sometimes out of respect to the professional development opportunity this allows, we do not record them so people can feel more free to ask their questions that they really want answered. So the next day, there is a course called 70 Minutes on Chapter 70. That's at noontime. Again, it's online, so that's Wednesday, February 16th. And according to MGL, Chapter 71, Section 36A, we're all supposed to take charting the course within the first year of being elected to school committees. There was a little grace period extended because of COVID, but that's ending. There's multiple opportunities to get your certification, and if you have already done it, you're always invited to come back for refreshers. So one way to satisfy that is March 12th and 19th. There's some online opportunities for that. On May 21st, there's an opportunity in Franklin, Massachusetts. On June 11th, there's an opportunity at Upper Cape. And on September 24th, there's one in Canton. So I just picked the ones that are geographically closer to us, but that's charting the course. So that's my legislative report.
Wonderful, it was very good, thank you. As always. Negotiations, we did not have our meeting, we're actually meeting next week, I think a week from tonight.
And we have time to do the collective bargaining training with MASC.
PAC, Leslie Ann is not here tonight. Policy, we have not met. And revolving accounts, we have not met. SAFER, Chris would have given the update for SAFER. I don't know, if you want to give some quick highlights, we could actually get into SAFER next month, because we also need to vote the capital plan budget as well, our spending.
So in your packet tonight is a draft capital plan proposal. There may be some adjustments based upon recent grant information, but that's something that we will discuss with Chris and determine whether or not the draft needs to be amended.
The other thing I think that he would probably want to discuss is he had contacted Tom O'Brien about the ARPA funds and whether or not ARPA funds could be used for improving the HVAC systems at our middle school and high school. They can in fact be used. I think it's a little trickier if a town has already started to use their ARPA funds. They have to wait to apply during their second allotment if in fact they've already partially used some of their funds. If they haven't, they can put it forward now, even if they need to wait, even if they need to extend into the next period to pay the remainder, is in layman's terms the best way that I can summarize it. Chris had done the communication and the outreach, so he has far more information than I do. But I think what we wanted to communicate tonight, that it is possible to use the ARPA funds for this purpose. What allotment you can use them in a particular town would depend upon whether or not you had already spent money in your first allotment.
Gordon?
Would the committee be able to send a letter formally to the boards of selectmen requesting the dollar amount that was calculated at that meeting? So that those votes can take place at the boards?
Sure, absolutely. Welcome to our treasurer's report.
Let's see, total for accounts payable is $1,752,433.32. Total payroll was $1,651,059.17, bringing a grand total to $3,403,492.49.
Thank you. Union 31, we obviously met right before this meeting this evening. Single signature warrants.
There were none, our last two warrants were done in person here. Could everybody just check to see if maybe they do have a warrant, because I have one warrant that says that.
Uh-oh.
Thank you.
Uh-oh, this one.
Hope it's a good one. All right, folks, dates to remember: winter break, February 21st through the 25th. In-service day for teachers, February 28th. And our next school committee meeting, March 10th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? Aye.
We're actually done like an hour sooner than I thought.
I know.